Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I'm going to be outlining Act 2 of Babylon Dithers. I'd previously talked about this book and Act 1 in particular in another video, which I'll tag in this video. I'm just going to assume you've already seen that video, so I don't want to recap everything. First, before I get into Act 2, there's a couple things with Act 1 I wanted to change. First off, something I talk about extensively in that first video is I was having issues with this Iraqi general because originally I dedicated a lot of time to him, and I was kind of thinking, that was detracting from Trevor Knight. I wanted it to be a Trevor Knight novel, not an Iraqi general novel. And so anyway, as I was composing Act 1, I don't actually introduce that Iraqi general into the main story until right here in chapter 10. So I don't really think readers are necessarily going to even remember this guy if originally what I was going to do here is I was going to introduce him in the prologue and then we don't meet him again until chapter 10. Well, I don't think readers are going to remember this guy by chapter 10. And having him here in the prologue just kind of slows the book down because Trevor Knight isn't introduced until chapter 1 here. But if I have all this other stuff, this scene with the Islamic State fighters, and then this scene with the Iraqi general, and then this scene with the Turkish consulate is attacked, even though I did have Trevor appearing in chapter 1 of the book, this would really probably be page 20 or so if I have all this other stuff. And so that doesn't really fit my goal of having Trevor introduced early in the story. So I'm thinking first off that this scene with the Iraqi general could just be deleted. I just don't think I need that. I don't need that scene with the Iraqi general to show the fall of Mosul. You're going to know through plenty of other stuff that Mosul falls to ISIS. And then when I introduce the Iraqi general here in chapter 10, it doesn't matter that you're meeting this guy for the first time. Trevor is meeting this general for the first time. So I think it's okay that the first time we meet this Iraqi general, it's because Trevor is meeting him. That makes it so this guy's story is not beginning on its own here in the prologue. His story begins with Trevor. And so in conversation with Trevor, this general could tell about how he was involved in the fall of Mosul and how he got down to, from an army of 2,000 men to just 8 men. So yeah, I just do not need this general here to tell the story of Babylon Dithers until right here when he actually shows up. Having him here in the prologue just slows the story. So this way, Trevor is introduced to readers earlier than he would have been. You don't have to read the extra 5 pages or so of this general in Mosul in the prologue. I could just get rid of it. It's unnecessary to the story. So that's one fairly major change I thought of making, even though it's really not a major change. It's just one scene for the prologue that's going to be gone. No one will miss that scene whatsoever. Then I was thinking some more. There's a scene where the Turkish consulate is attacked. Just the same logic is that if I have that scene there, it's going to take longer to get to Trevor, and you're going to have to read through 2 prologues just to get to the start of the book. And I do not need this scene with the consulate being attacked in the prologue. So what I could do in order to fit my desire to have Trevor introduced to readers earlier, I could just have this scene come after we meet Trevor here. So if I were to put it in chapter 2, right off the bat, what that does is it makes it so the prologue is not so long. You don't have to read this scene about this Turkish consulate being attacked. So you have this one scene with the Islamic State fighters, just 3-4 pages, whatever. And then, bam, we meet Trevor. Secondly, what it also does by moving it here like after we meet Trevor, is there's a scene here where Bayadi chooses to hire the satire force. That is directly because of this scene where the Turkish consulate is attacked. Bayadi wants to rescue his like diplomatic crew. And if I was to have it in the prologue, you would have to read that scene, and then you'd read all this scene with Trevor, and then you'd read this scene about Bayadi hiring the satire force, and you may not really remember that it's because of this scene here where the consulate is attacked. So it's just kind of unnecessarily making readers remember something from a couple chapters before, from 8 pages before, 10 pages before, whatever, unnecessarily, when we could just have it be chapter 2, and so that way it just flows better. So the scene with the Islamic State fighters in the prologue, then we meet Trevor in chapter 1. That'll only be page 5 or 6 of the book. Then we go back to Iraq and we see that this Turkish consulate is attacked, and then immediately from there we go to Bayadi hiring the satire force. So that's logically consistent or whatever. This event immediately triggers this event, and then Bayadi, he hires Samuel Creed, so they all flow immediately from one to the other, and then the SAT team arrives in Iraq. Again, it's all immediately connected. You don't have to remember from 2 chapters before or from 20 pages before. It's all instant. They all flow from one into the next. And I like that. And even though you may think oh, that's 4 chapters between, the last time we see Trevor till the next time we see Trevor. But that is okay, because basically with his scene meeting Trevor in Saudi Arabia, several days do have to pass until he arrives in Iraq. Because the scene where in Saudi Arabia, he's basically on good terms with the Saudi prince, Sajila. They are friends at that moment. And basically the way Arabian Dawn ends, they are not too well of friends. And very clearly in the book, several days does pass. I think at least 3 days. So if you assume this is right before that inciting event between Trevor and the prince in Saudi Arabia, at least 3 days do have to pass. So here we could have the first day, here we might have the second day, and then there might be the third day or whatever. And so then here is the 4th day after that meeting with the vice president, which perfectly makes sense. 4 days or so does have to pass between this scene and that scene, and 4 days or so would pass with all of these scenes. So I think that is fine. It doesn't matter that Trevor's going to be gone for 4 chapters. That's not a problem at all. That time does need to pass. And meanwhile, all these scenes immediately flow into each other, and then as soon as Trevor arrives in Iraq, he learns about all this. So even Trevor's scene here is connected with all of this. So I really like it. The next thing, let's see here. I was going to kind of add some notes because I may not actually write, this Act 1 for potentially a few months or maybe even a year or a few years. If I just get invested in other projects or whatever. So I may not even work on this book for months or years potentially. So I kind of want to leave a few more notes than I otherwise might. When I was a little bit younger, I might remember stuff. But, I'm kind of getting a little bit older and a little bit more forgetful. I don't think I need to make any notes for this because I just naturally know, since it's the first time meeting the satire force in the oil refinery, they're hunkered down in it. I won't need to leave notes. I'll know pretty much how to write that scene, hopefully. Now I'll probably 2 years from now say I don't have a clue what I'm supposed to write here. But for now, I shouldn't have a problem writing that scene. But right here, I don't know exactly which scene I want to do it with, either this one or this one. Ultimately, it doesn't matter really, but I kind of had an idea where the SAT team throws ammunition at the ISIS fighters. Because what I was thinking is they're like hunkered down in this oil refinery, and so they only have like limited equipment, limited ammunition and stuff. And the ISIS fighters would know this. So I thought of adding this scene where, these special forces team literally throws bullets at the ISIS fighters. And the reason I thought of this is because like in medieval days when they were like besieging cities, a fairly common tactic sometimes was for cities under siege to like launch food at the people besieging the city, because the idea was that if this city is wealthy enough and has enough provisions to just like launch food at the attackers may think like, oh, this city can hold out for months and months or years. Like, look, they're firing food at us. So, they have plenty of food. We can't just starve them out. And that has sometimes worked, like historically, where cities would do that. And then the attackers would think, oh, they have plenty of food. So, let's give up this siege. And it's also worked the reverse as well, where sometimes like people besieging a city, like there's this one guy in Spain, I think his name was El Cid. He actually launched food into the city, and the city, who was starving like the townsfolk, it kind of made them rebel because it's like it reminded them of how hungry they were. And it made them think that like their king was holding out on them, like the king secretly had food stashed away. So when El Cid like launched food into the city, the townsfolk rebelled and I think, surrendered basically. So it's just kind of an interesting way of it working in the reverse. So anyway, basically the SAT team, this counterterrorism team, is pinned down and they're very low on ammunition. So I thought, it'd be funny, whatever, if they actually throw bullets at the ISIS fighters. And so what would happen is the ISIS fighters would, have to think and be like, man, if they can throw bullets at us, they must have more ammunition than we thought. And so because of it, what's going to happen is they are going to decide, ISIS is going to decide that it's smarter to just starve these people out, the SAT team, because they know they did not have like massive food reserves or whatever. They only have like a limited supply of food, but they can believe that they do have a lot of ammunition because they're a special forces team. So it kind of stands to reason that they'd bring plenty of ammunition. So when the SAT team throws bullets at them, literally throws bullets, the ISIS fighters kind of decide, hey, they probably have a lot of ammunition if they're throwing it at us. So let's just wait them out. Let's just starve them out. And what that does is that buys them at least several hours or a day or whatever, where, the ISIS fighters don't attack because they just decide, let's just starve them out. And because of it, that buys the SAT team several hours or a night where the ISIS fighters don't attack them. And, basically like, maybe a half day or a day passes or like, overnight passes during this time. So yeah, so having this scene here where they throw bullets at the ISIS fighters makes the ISIS fighters say, let's just let them rest. Let's let them sleep and we'll attack maybe in the morning, or maybe we'll attack in a couple days when they're just starved out. So I thought that'd be a good scene. And then another scene, I don't know where to add it. So, maybe I'll move this scene with the ammunition like down to there or whatever. Or maybe I'll have this other scene right here maybe, or I don't know. But basically another idea I have for the SAT team, whatever, is that they may kind of be thinking, especially like their leader, his name is John Kingsley, he may be thinking he's going to save like enough bullets where he can kill his own team. Like once they run out of bullets, he may save like, 10, 15 bullets, whatever, one for each of his members. Like he is not going to let his team be captured by ISIS because he knows the horrible ways in which ISIS may torture and execute the SAT team. So yeah, John Kingsley, that may be like his last act as commander of his team, is to save bullets for each of them, to basically kill each one of them so that ISIS cannot torture and kill them. And what I think happens is the ISIS fighters, like maybe in the morning or whatever, they may like start kind of attacking the team. And maybe John Kingsley, maybe at that point, he's the only one who has ammunition left. And, he may see a couple of guys coming down the hall and shoot him. So like, he's down by 1 or 2 bullets, where, at least one member of his team now, besides himself, will have to live. So basically, with each bullet he fires, he could be dooming each member of his team to like a lengthy torture and execution. And so it's just a real kind of tough decision for him whether he should kill his team himself or whether he should just go ahead and shoot the ISIS fighters and just kill as many of them as possible, knowing that his own team is going to die in terrible ways, So I think that would just be a really emotional and kind of a dark scene where, yeah, each bullet he's firing is kind of, him deciding like, okay, there's another member of my team who may be tortured and executed, And of course, he could have conversations with his team, kind of telling them that, at that point that he's considering it like, I'm thinking of using these bullets on you guys instead of ISIS. And, maybe you could hear what his team thinks, where they could say like, kill as many of the bad guys as he can, don't worry about us. This is what we signed up for, Everyone faces death and we're willing to face it. Just make sure as much as possible that ISIS, as many of them as possible, dies before we do. And that's just kind of the mentality of these guys. They're all basically willing and ready to die. And they know they are screwed. They have no hope left. And so that's what will matter so much when the help does come for them. So anyway, I just kind of thought that would be a couple good changes to the act. So yeah, getting rid of the scene with the Iraqi general and then moving the Turkish consulate is attacked from the prologue to chapter 2. And then those couple ideas I had for the SAT team with the throwing the bullets at them, and also the thing with the commander John Kingsley is kind of saving his last bullets for his own men, just thinking, it's his last duty as their commander to ensure that, his team has quick, painless deaths instead of lengthy torture and execution. But in the end, they decide to go down, bringing as many of the ISIS fighters down with them as they can. Anyway, that's it for my thoughts for Act 1. Okay, now Act 2. Now, if you thought Act 1 was difficult for me, Act 2 is going to be something else, because even though I have some semblance of an idea of what happens, I am really struggling to put it all together. Again, just like with Act 1, my main priority or whatever is to keep Trevor Knight central in the story. So not just that Trevor Knight becomes a side character, because that can easily happen. So I'm trying to think of things that happen, like around the Mosul Dam and then the Sinjar Mountains over here. Again, this is northern Iraq. And I'm kind of having trouble figuring out like how Trevor is involved in all of this. I kind of know like I want him to be there at the end, but I just don't want to have other characters there for most of the time. You know, it's a Trevor Knight book. So I want Trevor to remain a central character. So that's something I really want to keep in mind for Act 2, is not letting other characters take over the novel. I have been thinking about this for several days. So what you guys just saw, like talking about, you know, fixing the stuff in Act 1, that was a few days ago. I've been trying to think of what happens in Act 2, and I just keep kind of running into dead ends and running into problems. Namely, like I say, Trevor is just kind of becoming a side character. I can kind of think of some storylines involving other characters, but Trevor kind of becomes just like a side character in all that, and I don't like that. I really do not have many good ideas for Act 2. Basically, what I'm like, you know, sure about, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have something with a Mosul dam, which is right here. You can see it's at the bottom of this lake here. So there's that, the Mosul dam. I mentioned in the previous video that Trevor considers draining this lake because ISIS takes over this dam, and if they like blow up the dam, it will flood like all of Iraq, and potentially 1 million people could die, and it'd just be catastrophic flooding. So I am considering that Trevor will consider draining this lake just to prevent that from happening. I don't exactly know how he would do that, like where he would drain it to, but I just kind of have to fudge on that. But since I don't really like him actually draining this lake, since that did not happen in real life, even though I don't mind detracting from history, if he was to drain that lake, I mean, Iraq's power situation would be catastrophically damaged. Like every hospital that, you know, runs on electricity, they would probably have their power out. So, I mean, Trevor, if he drains that lake, he would be dooming thousands of people to die. And then all the farmland and stuff in Iraq, you know, that would like dry up and stuff. So, I mean, you know, if he was to drain this lake, he could kill basically 1 million people just through like inadvertently, like, okay, now we don't have electricity and we don't have food, we don't have agriculture. So I do not think he will do that, even though I do kind of like the idea that Trevor tries to prevent one calamity, the dam, you know, blowing up and flooding the whole area. So he just drains this lake, and then as a result, he has all that problems with, you know, the water not going to the farms and also the hospitals losing power and all that. I kind of like that because Trevor, even though he intends to do good, he sort of unwittingly does bad things. Trevor is kind of a chaotic good. He's not Superman. Like Superman would, I don't know, Superman would take some kind of like big steel piece or whatever, and he'd just lift it and use it to block the dam, like any kind of like if the dam burst. Superman would just like get something like massive, like a building or something, and just block the dam with the building. You know, Trevor is not Superman. He's not a lawful good, you know, kind of some Dungeons and Dragons terminology. Trevor is a chaotic good, so he'll try to do good, but in doing good, he'll unwittingly do bad things. So like that is something sort of consistent with Trevor's personality, is he'd just think, okay, I'm not going to let this dam burst, I'm going to just drain the lake. I mean, Trevor would kind of do that, but I don't really like it for this book. So what I think he'll do is I think he will kind of like threaten to do that, and he'll like actually try to like begin the work to potentially drain this lake. I don't know how he would do it, like where he would drain it to, but I think I might have it where Trevor is definitely considering doing that. You know, even despite the consequences, he would rather do that than have this dam fail or ISIS blow it up. But I do not think that will happen, because historically the Kurds and the Iraqi government did retake this dam. So I think Trevor will kind of do that sort of as like a bargaining chip, you know, that's like backup plan. If the Kurds and the Iraqis do not secure this dam from ISIS, Trevor is already in the works preparing to just drain the lake. Like, okay, if you're going to allow ISIS to just have this dam and let them blow it up, screw that, I'm going to just drain the lake. So that's kind of Trevor's threat in a way to help, kind of entice the Kurds and the Iraqis to take that dam back. Because if Trevor was to drain the lake, they know how much disastrous, consequences that would have. So that threat alone would kind of give them a little kick in the rear end to make them want to retake that dam. Now, originally I was thinking I wanted that scene to kind of be the climax of Act 2, because it seems like it'd be a natural thing because it's a battle and the whole thing could kind of be building up to that. So there's this situation with the dam. And so the whole act could kind of be about, not the whole act, but I mean, it could be kind of the main theme or whatever for Act 2 is setting up all this stuff leading toward this conclusion or whatever with the Mosul dam. And again, it'd be a battle, and, a battle is a good, climax for the book. But that actual retaking of the Mosul dam happened, I think, in August of 2024. Battle for Mosul Dam took place in August 2014, the 16th to the 19th. So there's that, the 16th to the 19th. Then there is also the battle for Sinjar. In a 6-day-long offensive, the PKK and Peshmerga took control over parts of Sinjar. So yeah, that's in December, and the Battle of the Mosul Dam took place in August. So I think it makes more sense, just kind of following history as close as I can, that, there's some good distance between Sinjar and Mosul, even though Mosul is still in the hands of ISIS at this point. How does Trevor get to Sinjar? So I think what happens is after Act 1 and, ISIS is trying to take Baghdad, they kind of have a setback there. So I think what happens is after that scene in Act 1, for Act 2, it begins with ISIS moves westward and also northward. So at the start of Act 2, you could have one of the ISIS general guys, I think probably the main one, he could move west to this town Tal Afar. And what happened in real life is ISIS, just in early August or whatever, their first attack, they attacked this town of Tal Afar, and the Kurds in the city, like Peshmerga or whatever, the Kurdish, military, they fled. Instead of fighting ISIS, they were just like, oh, screw you guys, we're out of here. So the Kurdish military flees. They fled from both Tal Afar and this town Zumar. And so anyway, ISIS leader number 1, I mentioned him here in the prologue. Where is it? Scene with Islamic State fighters, so there's 2 of them. In Act 1, one of them went south to Tikrit, and the other one is pursuing the Iraqi generals, so there's 2 ISIS generals already introduced in the book. Where did Mosul go? I'm always losing it. I always think that lake is right there, because when I zoom out, I lose it. But anyway, so I think one of the ISIS generals, he goes west to this town Tal Afar, and the Kurds flee, and then he continues west to Sinjar, where it's going to be the Yazidi Christians and stuff are, facing genocide and stuff. A major point of Act 2. Meanwhile, the second ISIS general guy, he could go up to this town Zumar or whatever. I kind of want to say Zumar, but it's 2 M's, so I guess it is Zumar. He goes up to that town, attacks Zumar, and again the Kurds just flee, and then he goes east and takes over the Mosul Dam. So I think in Act 2, it could begin with Trevor up here in Erbil, because that's sort of like the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. So at the end of Act 1, he was down in this town Tikrit, so he could move up to Erbil. In fact, here for Act 1, it says conclusions. maybe I mentioned like in the previous video, like, Trevor could, meet with the SAT team, or he could call Samuel Creed, or Samuel Creed could call him, or whatever. Maybe at that time, Trevor has actually moved up from Tikrit and gone to Erbil, because Erbil is like the, capital of the Kurds, and Trevor wants to interact with the Kurds, So maybe for that chapter conclusions at the end of Act 1, maybe Trevor is already up here in Erbil, and maybe he could be eyeing having the Kurds like retake Mosul. But what happens is he could hear about this incident with the ISIS fighters taking over the Mosul dam, so he could kind of work his way up to this dam here to try to take that back from ISIS. But this is sort of the first question, is how does he do that? Because Trevor does not like have an army beneath him or anything. Like the SAT team, the satire force, they're gone, they leave the country. They're not sticking around with Trevor to fight with him, They did their job. Their job was to rescue the Turkish diplomatic crew, and they're done with that. I swear I always zoom in and lose Mosul and Erbil and stuff. It's hard because it's all like desert. They need to plant some trees in this region. So I'm kind of thinking, so Trevor at Act 2, he's in Erbil, and then one way or another, he works his way over here to the Mosul dam. He just kind of avoids Mosul because that's like, locked down. They don't free Mosul. In fact, I think for a couple of years, ISIS holds it for a couple of years. So it's not at all liberated yet. In fact, ISIS at this point is still like, I think ISIS got within 15 miles of the Baghdad airport. I mentioned Iraqis were trying to hold them off at Samarra, but we don't follow that because, that's not important to this story. It's a Trevor Knight story. It's not just the story of Iraq. But yeah, I think one way or another, ISIS in real life did continue on down here, and they did get within 15 miles of the Baghdad airport. So that is still going on currently. So the Iraqis are not able to retake Mosul. They're trying to defend Baghdad still. So the Iraqi military is out. They are occupied. The Kurds are probably still largely concerned about the fall of Baghdad. They're still probably not super concerned about the Mosul dam and stuff, even though in real life the Kurds did help out. So you could see the ISIS fighters took the Mosul dam August 7th. And right again, here we see after Kurdish forces retreated from the area. So it's just a continual theme. ISIS attacks Tel Afar, the Kurds flee. ISIS attacks Zamar, the Kurds flee. ISIS attacks the Mosul dam, the Kurds flee. So this is a major problem, the Iraqi Kurds just keep running away from ISIS. Some American officials describe the fall of the dam as grave concern. It could release a 66-foot wave of water, just devastating. Now this is very important. So that was August 7th. On August 16th, the U.S. Air Force launched airstrikes against ISIS positions. And then we see Kurdish forces also launched attacks against ISIS. So the Kurds and stuff and American airstrikes begin like a week after this event. So it can't be too long of time between ISIS taking over this dam and the Kurds coming to help. It's only about a week. They flee, but then a week later, so they do come back, which makes sense because, that dam falls and Trevor is probably still in Erbil at that time. So, maybe a couple days later, 2-3 days later, Trevor works his way up here somewhere. And maybe like one of these towns, if they're still in Kurdish control, maybe he tries like rallying the Kurdish fighters. And then, by about a week later, they could begin moving to retake the dam. So that did happen in real life within a week. Now, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but I think I do want to set this up since I am going to have, the Americans do airstrikes and stuff, and also like a bunch of people from around the world takes part in this, because I mean historically they did, like, to rescue the Yazidi Christians in Sinjar. I swear I always forget where Mosul and Erbil is. It wasn't just like they were completely on their own. So I mean Australia sent like forces to train the Iraqis. Italy sent some people. The United Kingdom, France participated in airstrikes. Greece allowed like NATO countries to use them for, a launching pad for Iraq, and also Cyprus over here. The British have a military base there, and so they also conduct attacks from Cyprus. I do not know if Saudi Arabia is going to get involved in this, even though I do not really think historically they did. I think I might have Saudi Arabia help with aid to the Kurds and to the Yazidi Christians. Just because that way I could kind of, have a Sajala in there. Turkey actually contributes to that, so they do help fight ISIS at that point. Trying to think of other countries that take part in it. I think Germany does some stuff. I think Finland does some stuff. The Americans and Canadians help. I think that is kind of about it. So, I mean, the international community does... Oh, God, I'm always losing... Nope, that's not Mosul. Mosul is right there. Gosh, I always think Mosul should be bigger, but it's not. So I'm always losing it. So the international community does help out here. So, I mean, it's not going to be like Trevor's just on his own against ISIS. He's going to get help. But there's going to be several days where it is kind of like Trevor is the only guy wanting to do something here. Oh, so what I was going to say was, since that does happen, historically, the international community does, jump in here. I do think I would like to show that a bit. I'm not sure exactly how much to show, but there's some stuff I definitely like to include. But like, Trevor's father, Stephen Knight, he's a senator. He could be like pushing the Senate to have a resolution about like the Sinjar massacre, which did happen. The US Senate did pass something calling it genocide. Also, the president, historically it was Barack Obama, but in the book his name is Buck Ramsey. He does order airstrikes against ISIS, even though like a big part of his campaign was to withdraw US forces from Iraq. He does send forces back to Iraq and does order airstrikes against ISIS. And so that's something Obama did. And so I have that with Buck Ramsey does that as well. Even though, I mean, Buck Ramsey is basically Barack Obama. It's just, fictional name. In fact, if you were to like look it up, Buck Nabosa Ramsey, I think it's spelled. If you like scramble the letters all around, it spells out Barack Hussein Obama. So it is Obama. I do it with other characters as well. So like the Secretary of State is named Carolyn Hamilton Riddell, I think. And if you scramble that around, you'll get Hillary Rodham Clinton. So, yep. Anyway, so I do think I could have scenes showing, Stephen Knight, Buck Ramsey, and then I have other characters introduced as well, like the British foreign minister. His name is Misha Hawksmoor, if he is still in office at the time. I don't know. I don't have like a biography of him yet, but I imagine he's still a foreign minister. He's really kind of a neoconservative, he's a real militaristic guy. The Trevor Knight series, even though I want to keep it confined to Trevor, it is the Trevor Knight series. It is, a wide-ranging series with like a bunch of characters and stuff. So as much as possible, I do like having those characters introduced, and I mean, there's other characters as well. Like eventually I want to have a book set in Italy. And so I know there's like a certain Italian character I could introduce who may be kind of doing some stuff in Iraq. And that could be setting up a Trevor Knight book for like, I don't even know what, like 15 Trevor Knight books from this one. just setting up something now. I like doing that, so that's not a problem for me. But anyway, so I do think I will have scenes with, the international community coming together and delivering aid and stuff. So just still kind of going on the basic plot. I don't want to start talking about Sinjar yet, but so Trevor, he could ultimately work to retake this dam. I don't know exactly how that's going to happen. And then by then, the Kurds are fighting at that point, and the U.S. is assisting with airstrikes. So then from there, they could kind of push and take Zamar and Talafar and work their way to Sinjar. So they go whoop, whoop, and to Sinjar to rescue them. So originally, I was going to have everything kind of building up to this climax in the Mosul Dam, but instead I think it's going to work the opposite, where this situation with the Yazidi Christians is the focus of Act 2. Just like with Act 1, the real focus was rescuing the satire team stranded in Mosul. Act 2 is working to rescue the Yazidi Christians from Sinjar. So kind of the first step is to gather forces to retake the Mosul Dam. For one, just to get to Sinjar, they need to, clear some space. And for two, there's the danger of if ISIS blows up that dam, it'll just be catastrophic for Iraq. So, even though, Trevor will in fact probably say at some point that these Sinjar people or the Yazidi people are the priority, I think someone, they'll probably say there's 50,000 of them there, but if that dam blows up, there's going to be 1 million people potentially who get killed. So even though it's, a real tough situation, 40,000 people compared to 1 million. So really the Mosul Dam does take the initial priority, and they get that resolved pretty quick, a few days. So then from there, they begin working their way west, and then I have some other ideas, which I don't want to get to right now, but then some Kurds will arrive from Syria, even though at this point, the Kurds largely just kind of control this section around Kobane, probably about that much of territory. So they don't have a whole ton of Syria yet at this point, but what's going to happen is some Kurdish Syrian fighters are going to make their way over to Sinjar, and they're going to open up a corridor here where the Yazidi Christians can get out into Syria. And one of these towns in Syria is going to kind of be occupied by the Americans, because the Americans are already assisting the Kurds in Kobane and stuff. The Americans are already participating in bombing ISIS in Syria. So the Americans are already in Syria at some point. So the Kurds are going to open up a corridor to help get the Yazidi Christians out of Sinjar. They don't so much go into Iraq because there's still a lot of ISIS fighters in this area, and ISIS still has Mosul and stuff. So mostly they're going to just make this quick hop into Syria. And that is pretty much the gist of Act 2. There is a lot more to talk about for it, which I guess is the purpose of this video. So one thing I have not touched on yet is I was reading up about the Sinjar massacre and stuff, and just what ISIS was doing to these people. And it's just really bad. In all these towns, basically what ISIS did is they would kill all of the men and a lot of the boys, any kind of males. They would just kill them, just all of them. And then with the women and the girls, they would, take them into slavery and, just do atrocious things to them. The first thing they'd do is they'd have gynecologists check to see if the women were virgins or not. And if they were, then they'd kind of be sold for, maybe $50. And if they're not, they may just sell them for $10 or $20. And if if the women had a pregnancy, if they were pregnant, ISIS like forced them to have abortions, because since they'd be pregnant with Yazidi, children, and Yazidis are kind of like largely Christians, ISIS would have them, force abort their child, and because they wanted to impregnate them with, Muslim babies. When Sinjar is taken, initially like 7,000 women and girls are taken into slavery, and like for all these towns, Zamar and Talafar and all of it, Sinjar, as soon as ISIS takes over, that's what they do. They kill all the men and the boys and enslave all the girls and the women and have them have forced abortions and then sell them into slavery and have them breed for the ISIS fighters, and just, real barbaric stuff ISIS was doing to them. And so when I was reading that, I was just really like, I do not want to write these scenes, I just don't want to do it. I've already written, several scenes close to that. Like I have in Syrian Dander, there's a scene in Raqqa where I show the ISIS leader and he has like, 5 young girls that he has like slaves and, doing terrible stuff to them. So that's in Syrian Dander. I don't like that. Then in Keeping Fire, I have the Nigerian, like the Chibok schoolgirl kidnappings somewhere here. There it is, Chibok. Wow, I actually found that pretty easily. So that's Boko Haram enslaving Christian girls and stuff, and just real terrible things happening. So I just don't want to write another book about that, even though I do cover it because it's the Sinjar massacre and stuff. So I have to have that, mention of it. But I was thinking, I don't want to show any kind of those scenes. I don't want to show any scenes of assault. Just, I don't want that in this book, even though it is happening, and I'm going to make it clear that, all this stuff is happening, so you do see basically the women being sold into slavery and stuff, and ISIS fighters picking out which women they want and stuff, and I'm not going to show it graphically or anything, but you'll know that they're doing the stuff with like the virginity checks and the forced abortions and all that. So you'll know that all that's happening, but I do not want to show a chapter showing that happening, because I just don't want that, because I think that's also kind of exploitative, because it's why do I really need to show that in graphic detail? I think one of two things could happen when you do that. One is you could just lose readers. People just probably don't want to read that. But then you may also have the reverse, where maybe people are like, ooh, I like this scene, and just all this detail, and it's so graphic, and they kind of like that. They kind of get into that, where it's like they're on the edge of their seat and they're reading about all this. I don't like that. That's just exploitative, where it's not like some terrible thing, where readers are actually enjoying those scenes or whatever. And I don't want that. It's not something anyone should enjoy. So I think it's better to just kind of leave those scenes more to be implied, not showing them in graphic detail or whatever. So they're happening, but you don't see it happening. Thank you, babe. So, I don't have any scene of ISIS fighters prying apart women's legs and checking them, but I will let you know some way that that's what they're doing. But again, just not showing it in detail at all, because I don't want that. I've already done scenes close to that in Syrian Dander with the Raqqa scene, and then in Keeping Fire with the Chibok girls. So I just don't want that in this book. You'll know what's going on, but you're not going to follow it in depth. Then still kind of talking about just my plans for this act. I don't know if it's going to be this act or the next act, or if I'm going to have it at all. Another thing ISIS was doing was destroying historical monuments and stuff. And this is another thing that really enraged me, is there'd be churches and temples and stuff from hundreds of years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or even in some cases from 3000 BC and stuff. And ISIS would just like blow up all these temples and all these architectural sites and stuff, because their reasoning was that these like churches and like old mosques and stuff, even mosques. So, I mean, they're blowing up mosques. And they're also, blowing up like Sumerian, architecture, or like ancient Syrian, monuments and stuff. They're destroying all these historical sites because their reasoning kind of is that if it's not built to their exact religious denomination, all these like religious and cultural sites are anti-religious to them. They're like polytheistic. They're worshiping other gods other than ISIS's god. So ISIS is destroying all these historical monuments like all across the region. And, that is absolutely real. They did that. And I'd kind of like that to be included as well. But, it's real hard to fit in because, I mean, where do I fit that in? Like, if I fit it in Act 2, it's not going to be a priority over the dam. It's not going to be a priority over the Sinjar Christians and stuff. Or I keep saying Sinjar Christians, Yazidi Christians. So I'm kind of thinking that could be something more that I introduce in Act 3, but I don't know. I might have it mentioned in Act 2. I could begin to set it up. But, just as I'm saying this, I don't think I should, because the focus, it seems much more clear that, the focus on the Mosul Dam, and the reason we need to take that is because of all the catastrophic flooding, and then we need to get to Sinjar to rescue those Christians. So at no point there can Trevor go off and like fight to save historical monuments or whatever. That is not going to be a focus yet. Even if I were to introduce it now, it would be a detraction, because like, why introduce the monuments now if nothing's going to be done about it until like Act 3 or whatever. So I think that is something that will have to wait, even though I would like to introduce it. I think it just has to wait because I need to keep the focus on Mosul, the Mosul Dam, and Sinjar. So my whole idea for the monuments and stuff, I was thinking, I could write that into Act 2, but I think all that stuff with the monuments and stuff could wait till Act 3, which is Trevor goes to Syria to fight ISIS, because at least there, I don't know if he's going to have as direct a goal. Oh, there's Al-Tabqa. I think I mentioned that somewhere right. Right here. Battle for Al-Tabqa Air Base in Syria, Act 3. So I think I just saw Al-Tabqa. So yeah, there's that there. So yeah, that could be a focus of Act 3, but I don't know, there's a lot that could happen. I mean, there's like Camp Kate, a humanitarian camp established in Syrian Dander that's located somewhere over here. Trevor could go there. I mentioned in the previous video, I could set up like the Turkish-backed rebels who are going to take over Syria. So maybe Trevor goes to Camp Kate for some reason, and maybe he could meet with or hear about the Turkish-backed rebels. The Kurds could be moving to take Raqqa because, like I said, they're up here around Kobane, so they have about this much territory. So that Al-Tabqa or whatever is right there. So I mean, that could be like their first step to taking Raqqa. So I could show that. There's also a city, right there, Palmyra. So this is where one of the major historical sites are. In fact, there you can see ruins. So like those ruins are probably gone now. ISIS destroyed like all the ruins and stuff. Just pisses me off that they would do that stuff from 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or whatever, just blowing it up and just getting rid of all of it. So anyway, I'm sorry I'm still talking about this because this is more something for Act 3 that I'm deciding on. But originally I was kind of thinking, maybe I'll put this, like start setting it up in Act 2. But just like I said, I don't think it should be a focus now. So, so I'm kind of thinking Act 3, Camp Kate could be a thing. Al-Tabqa Air Base could be a plot point. Palmyra or whatever could be a issue or whatever, a setting. So Trevor could kind of be going all over Syria. So Basically, the point is, like, you could find out about the Turkish-backed rebels. I could set that up around Camp Kate. I could set up the stuff about the historical monuments and stuff. Maybe Trevor goes down to Palmyra for some reason. And then as far as like getting closer to Raqqa, I could have the Al-Tabqa Air Base thing. So that could all be in Act 3. So I think the historical monuments and stuff could wait. So now I'm pretty well decided that Act 2 begins with ISIS taking over Tal Afar and Zumar, and the Kurds flee. Then the one guy goes to Sinjar, the other guy goes to the Mosul Dam. Trevor goes to the Mosul Dam to fight back the one guy, and maybe I'll actually wind up killing him here. Since after Act 2, Trevor will go to Syria, these ISIS leaders are kind of irrelevant then, because once they're out of the story, for Act 2, I think they're pretty much done with the story, because Trevor's going to go to Syria, so there could be entirely different ISIS fighters there. And Act 4, when he goes back to Iraq, I don't think ISIS is going to be as much a problem there. I think Trevor's going to be more around, northern Iraq, trying to push the Kurds to go independent. So I don't think those ISIS generals are going to come into the story after Act 2. So, basically at this point, they could kind of be killed off anytime. I don't know if they will, though. I could save them for, like, Atlantis Dislodged or whatever. Anyone who survives this book is almost certainly going to appear in Atlantis Dislodged, the next book. So maybe one of those generals survives, and maybe they become, like, the next ISIS leader or something. But, one of those generals could get killed. And so anyway, Trevor fights and retakes the Mosul Dam. Then they work their way back to Sinjar. And Kurds come from Syria. And they, begin helping the Yazidi Christians to flee into Syria where they could be safe. And that's kind of the end of Act 2. So that's it for the summary. I think that's actually a pretty good summary. I think the whole gist of that plot makes sense. I don't really see any logical problems with that. So the last time you saw Trevor, he was into Crete. And so, while Iran is rescuing the Satar force, Trevor could be driving up to Kirkuk and driving up to Erbil. That's probably a half-day drive or whatever, 5-hour drive or something like that. So while that is going on, Trevor is making his way up to Erbil. So for Act 2, Trevor's already here, so it's just kind of a short hop over to the Mosul Dam. So I think that all makes sense. Okay, so I was just kind of clicking around a little bit, and so I see these couple towns here like Babira, and there's also a Babira down there. They're exact the same, except one is missing an H. I looked it up, and one of them, the one that ends with an H, I guess, it says here it's populated by Yazidis. So that is good, because these people here in this town would want to help out the Yazidis over here in Sinjar, but it's a long ways. But there's Yazidis, so Trevor can kind of realize right away these people, should have reason to help. Because at this point, I think they are hearing about, the Sinjar, Yazidi Christians and stuff are running into difficulties. So I think that is known at this point. So actually, before I even go there, I guess since the whole act is kind of leading up to, the Mosul Dam and Sinjar, I think I could begin by setting that up. So I don't really want to do 2 chapters for this, but what I'm thinking is, one of the first things I could set up for Act 2 is the ISIS generals. One goes to Tal Afar, one goes to Zumar. I think they both happened pretty much about the same time, so I don't think one really needs to come before the other. Since the Yazidi Christians are kind of the main focus of the act, I swear that mountain looks like something. I won't say what, but that mountain, it just looks very... It has a very distinct shape. I may have Trevor mention that at some point in the book. That just, this kind of looks like something there. Anyway. Since the whole Act Two is kind of building up to, Sinjar, I think it's good if I begin with that. So, Tal Afar. So, I'll just say ISIS General Number 1 attacks Tal Afar. The Kurdish security forces flee the area. Cowards. And I don't know if that's going to be too long of a chapter, so maybe I could also just throw in ISIS General Number 2 attacks Zumar. The Kurdish security forces flee the area. Is that good for Act 2? I guess. I was going to throw in a scene with the Yazidi Christians, but since ISIS just arrived in Tal Afar, they are not there yet, so I don't think I need that. I don't think I need anything for the Mosul Dam yet. So you know what? I would like to have some kind of a scene with Trevor, but since not a whole ton is going on right here at this point, like another day needs to pass for the ISIS to reach the Mosul Dam and Sinjar. I could afford to do something else either. I don't want to show ISIS down here, but I could do something with the Iraqi Prime Minister, or I'm not able to do the thing with Trevor's father and the proclamation about the Yazidi genocide and all that, because that's not going on yet. So I think I did consider there's this Yazidi royalty guy who lets out some kind of message saying that, all the bad things that are happening here in Sinjar, but that's still not going on. But I mean, that could be something where Trevor hears about that, because Trevor needs to hear at some point that the Sinjar Yazidi Christians are under attack. So, I mean, that's not really going on yet. So Trevor doesn't really quite have anything to do with that yet. He doesn't have to do with the Mosul Dam yet. So there's the Iraqi Prime Minister. He's kind of a corrupt guy. He's kind of inept. Again, the Iraqi Prime Minister is a Shia Muslim, and he's real close with Iran, and it's kind of because of him that ISIS has grown, because this prime minister, this Shia Muslim guy, he's done a lot of anti-Sunni policies, and a lot of Iraq is Sunni Islam. Iraq is really divided. There's the Sunni Muslims, there's the Shia, and there's the Iraqi Kurds, and they all live there, and there's also Assyrian Kurds up here in the north, and there's the Yazidi Christians. So I mean, it's a pretty diverse country, really. But this Shia prime minister has anti-Sunni policies, and so because of it, the Sunnis are pretty mad at this guy. So that's kind of drummed up Sunni fervor or whatever. So when ISIS entered the country, it's kind of in a small way, the Sunnis of Iraq are kind of heck with, this prime minister. This prime minister is just pro-Iran. So they're not super altogether, I don't want to say they're pro-ISIS, but that's kind of why ISIS has a bit of momentum, is because this Shia prime minister has been really buddies with Iran and really kind of anti-Sunni. So what's going to happen is eventually this prime minister is going to resign from office, and another Shia Muslim is going to take his place. So it's not just going to go to the Sunnis. It's going to be another Shia Muslim, but he's going to be a little bit more, inclusive of the Sunnis. So that's going to kind of take away some of ISIS's power because the Sunnis in Iraq are going to feel more represented. So I would kind of like to set more of that up, even though it's not like directly involving Trevor. It will involve Trevor because right now the Iraqi government is really non-functional. They're just trying to protect Baghdad. They don't really have any plan for how to defeat ISIS. And also, like, what this prime minister does, this Shia prime minister, is he says, like, once, the Americans and stuff, the international community, once they kind of start talking about sending help to Iraq, this prime minister is going to be like, we don't need help. All you guys, like the Americans, they're just trying to reinvade Iraq, So that's going to be his argument, that like all these airstrikes and stuff, his position is going to be like, oh, here the Americans go again. They're wanting to make war in Iraq. They want to station forces in Iraq again. They've only been gone for like a few months or a year or so. So it's like, oh, here they are. They're on their way back. We don't want them here. And so, part of what Stephen Knight is going to do, why he met with this guy, Stephen Knight is going to tell the president that Iraq is non-functional with this prime minister. So he's going to wind up resigning. The Iraqi president, who is actually a Kurd, and that's like real life, he's a Kurdish in real life. The president, I think, appoints a new Shia prime minister, and so he is kind of more, open to some American help and stuff. Even though he doesn't want the Americans to stay, they'll accept all these countries helping to train the Iraqi forces and also delivering some military aid and stuff and doing airstrikes. So that prime minister is okay with that. So I think I could work to set that up. Now, again, this was kind of a problem with me, as I was thinking, okay, if I do that, I could have that be a theme of this act, so here I could have a scene with the Iraqi prime minister kind of setting it up, and then at the end of the act, he could be, he could resign. But just like I say, that would mean there'd be like an Iraqi prime minister scene there. There'd be a scene with him there. There'd be a scene with him there, a scene with him there. And it'd become more of an Iraqi prime minister book. And I don't want that. And also, since the international community does intervene fairly early, I think this prime minister is not going to stick around for long. So it's not going to be like the whole act is about, trying to get him out of office. I think it could kind of begin with he is really just non-functional. So, the thing is, the Americans are not yet wanting to do airstrikes and stuff because the whole thing with the Yazidi Christians is not really started yet. So, there's no pretext or whatever for the airstrikes, even though, they don't like ISIS. They're not intervening yet. Like I say, ISIS is approaching the Baghdad airport. So maybe I could have that be the context. I wonder if there's a scene. Baghdad airport. Baghdad airstrike. Let's see. Let's see. As far as down here, the characters I know I can do stuff with. There's the Iraqi general. He could still be fighting, ISIS. I don't really want to show him though. He's the one who's going to wind up fighting the Kurds in Act 4. I should show the prime minister in some way. It's just what? I did think that there's this airbase, Balad Air Base or whatever. It's an American base that in 2014 or whatever, the base came under attack by ISIS militants. So, ISIS is already past Samarra, and they're also attacking the town of Bakuba. And they're within 40 miles of Baghdad now. I don't want to show the Iraqi generals really, unless it's just a mention of him, like he's just standing nearby or whatever. I don't want to show him otherwise. I don't want to do a whole chapter with him. I think Stephen Knight, Trevor's father, is already out of the country because, I mean, he's a senator. So, how long is his diplomatic mission in Baghdad for? And, ISIS is on the march. So I don't think he would still be in the town, because originally what I was thinking is he could fly out of this airbase, since ISIS is surrounding it. But kind of the problem with that is, well, would they be running flights out of this airport if ISIS has them surrounded on three sides? Why wouldn't they have flown them out of some other airport somewhere? So I think that's just a problem. So shoot. I guess, I want to have some kind of a scene with the prime minister to just show that this guy is, not helpful. How could I do that? Could I have a scene with him and Asajala? Or a scene with Iran? I think the actual prime minister did go to Iran for some reason. I forget his name. Was it al-Malaki? Malaki? I don't know. Oh, maybe. Noor al-Maliki. Is this the guy? Prime Minister of Iraq? Yeah, this looks like the Prime Minister. So this is the one who I'm kind of basing it off of. And I think, he's a Sunni Muslim. And let's see if it shows religion. Or yeah, Shia Muslim is what I meant to say. So just like looking up this guy. Basically what I think happens is he at one point announced that he would be stepping down or not running for re-election or whatever. And then he kind of detracts from that. So he actually says like, no, I'm actually staying in office. And the president then says like, no, you got to go. And I think he did actually come back into office again. 2014, he was named one of the 3 vice presidents. So yeah, even though I think he was is this the guy? Maybe it's not. Maybe this is the guy who replaced that guy. Prime Minister in Iraq, Vice President. Okay, yeah, so what I think happened was he was Prime Minister, then I think he withdrew from office, and then for one reason or another, they named him like one of 3 Vice Presidents later on, which I probably wouldn't show. So like I said, right here in 2014, he accused the United States of using ISIS as a pretext. And by the way, the reason I say ISIS, not ISIL, is because ISIS is Islamic State in Syria, but ISIL is Islamic State in the Levant. And the Levant or whatever, Levant, whatever it is, that is like the whole Middle East, like the Levant. It basically means like Holy Land. And the Levant or whatever includes Israel. So by calling them ISIL, what you're kind of saying is that they are the Islamic State in the Holy Land, including Israel, which kind of means that when you say ISIL, you're saying that they are like the kingdom of the whole Middle East, the whole Holy Land, including Israel, meaning that Israel is rightfully Islamic State territory. Whereas if you just say Islamic State, or Islamic State in Syria, then it's not like saying they have that Israel belongs to them as well. So I do not use the word ISIL at all. It's just ISIS or Islamic State. So that's just something I believe in. He stated that the Americans began this sedition in Syria and then blah, blah, blah. So yeah, basically this guy is saying, this prime minister is saying, the Americans are just using ISIS as an excuse to take over the country again. In September, during approval of the new government led by, who's that guy? Iraqi politician who was prime minister. Oh, so that's the new prime minister. He was named one of 3 vice presidents. A largely ceremonial post. I could show that more, and I mentioned in like my research notes here, Prime Minister number 1. So his name is Mohammad Raza Gholamadi. No idea if I pronounce that right. That'd be a miracle if I did. Then I kind of like have his biography here. Let's actually see what I have here. Under the let's go back a little bit. After growing calls from world leaders, he steps down. The prime minister scolds Knight, saying he and the Americans are treating Iraq like their property. Under the advice of Secdef Marsh, that's the Secretary of Defense, Tom Marsh, John Walters, he is like Tom Marsh, this guy who is currently the Secretary of Defense of the United States, he's going to wind up becoming the next president. And John Walters, who is introduced in German Derelict, he's an American general in Iraq. John Walters becomes Tom Marsh's new Secretary of Defense. But that's like several books away. Now head of a lobbyist firm, begins a public campaign to undermine the prime minister. So I could have that where I could jump from this scene. Did I actually write any? I was trying to find where my outline went, but it's on that page. ISIS General Number 1, blah, blah, blah. So I could, after that scene of showing the guys moving to Mosul Dam and Sinjar. I'm sure no one is listening to me at this point. I'm just talking to myself, but that's okay. I could jump over here to the United States, but have it be a scene with Tom Marsh, who's going to be the future president, and he could have a meeting with John Walters. John Walters is from New York. Kind of a fun fact. I wrote this originally, I planned these characters back in 2007, before we even knew who would be president. So originally, in the very first iteration of a Trevor Knight book, it was called Colombian Death. The president was kind of implied to be Hillary Clinton, because at that point we all kind of thought Hillary would win. So in that book, Hillary Clinton is kind of president. And then what I was going to do is I was going to have the Secretary of Defense, Tom Marsh, who is from Philadelphia. He would take over as the next president. I was kind of basing Tom Marsh a little bit on George W. Bush. He's really a neoconservative guy. He's, really kind of a pro-war guy. And his vice president was going to be John Walters, this military general from New York. But I was actually kind of basing John Walters on Donald Trump, because John Walters' family was going to be very rich. So he was going to be a rich dude, but he's a military general, but he has a lot of money. His family is really well off. So that's how it was going to be. Tom Marsh would be the president, and then John Walters would be, I think it was his Secretary of Defense, or was it his vice president? I don't know. I thought John Walters is his Secretary of Defense, though, but I think he becomes president as well. So it'd be, Tom Marsh as president, and then John Walters, the kind of Donald Trump guy, would be the president after him. So that's just kind of funny that, I was going to have a Donald Trump inspired guy wind up becoming president. That was back in 2007, before Obama was even president. But again, he wasn't going to be a complete copy of Trump, because he was going to be more of a military guy, kind of turned a lobbyist. So he wasn't a real estate developer or whatever. But anyway, so I'm just totally talking to myself at this point. So I could have a scene with Tom Marsh meets with John Walters, now a lobbyist, and they agree to begin a campaign to, I want to say oust, but I don't want it to give that impression that they're running a coup against him. Campaign to delegitimize the Prime Minister of Iraq, because he has to go. So I don't think I need any kind of lengthy scene or whatever with the Prime Minister. I could just show here in the United States at the Pentagon or whatever, the Secretary of Defense is meeting with a lobbyist, is kind of an old friend, sort of, John Walters, and they kind of agree hey, we need to get rid of this Iraqi prime minister. And this is just sort of typical American interventionism, So how I talk about that prime minister is using ISIS as an excuse to get back into the country. Well, I keep wanting to say Obama. President Ramsey, the president, he does not want to reoccupy Iraq, even though he does wind up ordering airstrikes. He does not want to send like 100,000 troops there. Tom Marsh would, though. Tom Marsh is a neoconservative. He basically wants war. He thinks, we have a Iranian puppet in charge of Iraq's government. We need to get rid of that guy. We need to have more of a pro-American prime minister. So here you do see the Americans are, from Washington, D.C., trying to decide the political future of Iraq, where they're like, this guy loves Iran. We need to get him out of office. And what it's ultimately going to serve is when they do get him out of office, the Iraqi government's going to send more aid to help retake the Mosul dam and retake Sinjar. So that's why all of this is important with the prime minister. Oh my gosh, I am only talking to myself at this point. Not a single person is watching this video. If you're watching this video, type, 12 in the comments. So, ISIS general attacks, blah, blah. Tom Marsh meets with John Walters, so they want to get that prime minister out of there. Then, I guess... since Talafar already happened, then I could have a scene with the Yazidi Christians, or do I need a different scene? I think for now I'll just put in Yazidi... Oh, wow, I spelled it right. Yazidi Christian scene near Sinjar? Is that spelled right? Sinjar. Okay, so like I say, I don't want to have graphic descriptions or anything, but I think basically what I'll show is like a family. Oh, look at Nibbler, isn't he so gorgeous? I think I'll kind of know how to write that. So I'll just show like one family largely and what happens to them. So like, there's the father, and I mean, this is all kind of like spoilery stuff, but oh well. The father, they're going to say they're going to take him on a transfer to like a prison camp or whatever. So they drive all the men out of town and just shoot them all, 400 men, just gun them all down in the desert. And then they began going through all the women, sorting out all of them. And I also think what I'm also going to show, and again, this is just so dark, but I mean, this is part of the series and it's, part of real life. What happened in real life is, since these mountains, these Sinjar mountains, are considered sacred to the Yazidis, what ISIS did is they buried several people alive in these mountains, or in Sinjar and stuff, and at the mosques or churches or whatever, any kind of holy site or whatever. They bury boys and stuff alive. Because again, ISIS doesn't care about boys, because if they're Yazidi boys, ISIS just thinks, oh, well, they're, not Muslim boys, so we're just going to kill them. We don't need them for anything. And so what they do is they bury some of them alive and stuff, at these shrines or whatever, because the idea is oh, how can this be your sacred space? Because now your children are buried here, so I mean, it's oh, well, obviously God doesn't protect these mountains very well, does he? Freaking ISIS. So the father, he's going to get taken off and get shot, and then I think they'll also have a boy who will get buried alive, which, I will actually probably show that scene where you actually see backhoes or whatever, covering him up in dirt. So I will probably have that scene, and his sister and his mother may have to watch that. So just real devastating stuff. And then the mother, I should probably not tell you guys this stuff because absolutely no one's going to want to read this. But with the mother, since, she's kind of older, she's in her 40s or whatever, what ISIS does is they say that they like give her a note that says like, $20 or whatever, and have her walk down a block. And if no one buys her for $20, then they'll just give her like a note that says like $5 and have her walk back. And if no one buys her by the time she walks back, then they kind of decide, well, we can't get this woman pregnant and no one wants to sleep with her. So then they just take her off and kill her if no one buys her. And again, this is like absolutely based on the kind of stuff ISIS did. And then, the daughter or whatever, I don't know how old she'll be, but she'll be like 17 or 18 or so. She'll be made to walk, down the block. They'll give her like whatever, they may make her like $50 or something. And then I think she'll also have an older sister, and her older sister will probably be pregnant. So they'll take her sister off to give her sister a forced abortion. So that all happens to this one family. So that'll just kind of show you what ISIS is doing to these Christians here. And again, that's entirely based on real events. And, it's real difficult, dark stuff, but that's how it is. So this isn't like an action book where it's just bad guys just killing, nameless people where it's just you don't care about them, whatever. Real people went through all this stuff. And that's kind of part of why I write it, is to bring some kind of awareness to all this. Because so much of this series, like stuff that you would think is like totally way out there, like, oh, that never happened, that's crazy. These things are absolutely real. These are real people, and real people went through all of this. And so I kind of want to show that. But again, I don't want to show like in too graphic detail. So I think the only thing you'll like really see is that they have the one kid buried alive. So, I think I will show that. But in terms of like the girls or women being assaulted or whatever, I just don't want any of those scenes. So I think that's how I'll do it, is ISIS will just give them like a dollar amount and they'll walk down the street, and if anyone wants them, they just grab them and pay the ISIS fighter the money. And then that becomes that fighter's wife or whatever. And that's how ISIS did it. But I'm not going to like show any scene where like, the guy takes her to a house and assaults her or whatever. I'm not going to have any scenes like that. I don't want to write any of those scenes. I don't want to have any scenes like that. But you're going to basically know that's what's going on. So anyway, Yazidi Christians seen near Sinjar. I'll just say it in Sinjar. In Sinjar. I'll just write, father is shot, mother is sold, older daughter gets a forced abortion, younger daughter is sold, brother is buried alive. Dark stuff, but yeah, I guess that's all one scene. And since I kind of want this to happen earlier, mother is sold, older daughter gets a forced abortion, I think that might happen before the scene with the mother. So I think it goes, the father is killed, then the brother is buried alive, the older girl is taken away to get a forced abortion, then the mother is made to walk down the street with the sign saying how much, she costs, and then there's a scene with the younger girl, like 18 years old or whatever. Part of why I actually decided to add like that person into this scene, besides just being able to show like, a Yazidi Christian, that I could have a perspective character so what's going on here. In Atlantis Dislodged, when Kate goes to meet with Trevor, I think there's going to be kind of a younger woman like alongside Trevor. They are not like romantically involved with each other. So I just want that to be clear right off the bat. She's not a love interest for Trevor. But what I think could happen is originally that young woman was just going to be like a, generic Kurd. What I think it could be is this young girl, this Yazidi girl, could be that girl. So basically my idea is, she survives all this stuff going on in Sinjar. Trevor and the Kurds eventually rescue her, and then that girl goes into Syria with the Kurdish female fighters and stuff. And that girl, the Yazidi girl, becomes a fighter where, she joins the fight against ISIS, because probably her whole family is dead at that point. So at that point, she probably just thinks, I just want to kill all these ISIS fighters. All these ISIS fighters are just complete vermin. So train me to fight, train me to be a soldier. And so that's what happens with her, is she becomes one of the female fighters who Trevor will, fight alongside. So that's kind of the arc for this character. And also I like it because in my books, I try to have like strong female characters. So this girl, this Yazidi girl, becomes kind of a, real dedicated fighter. And yeah, I don't want to say more about it right now, but there's also some other scenes I have ideas for her, especially one which hopefully I'll remember to talk about. Oh, I'll just say it here so I don't forget. Basically, once, Sinjar is liberated and Trevor and the Kurds and stuff are all there, I think I kind of want to have a scene where like ISIS is maybe like going house to house looking for people. And I kind of think they go into a house and there's a boy hiding in there, and maybe he thinks one of the ISIS fighters sees him, but instead of like killing him, because ISIS is killing all of the men and all of the boys, ISIS just leaves. So they leave that boy alive. And then like shortly after that, once ISIS is defeated and stuff, and like, I think the Kurds and stuff and the Yazidis, they may kind of just kill all the ISIS fighters they capture. So what I think happens is they have like all the ISIS fighters like, trapped or whatever, where, they're defeated. And the Kurds and stuff are kind of deciding what to do with them. And that boy from the house will recognize one of the fighters. And I think he'll kind of ask, like, did you see me? Did you see me in the house? And that fighter may like say like, yes, I saw you. And basically that fighter like chose to let that boy live. So it's kind of like a rare moment where you actually see some bit of humanity in one of the fighters, where one of the ISIS fighters is like, he sees a boy hiding and he doesn't point him out to his guys because he knows that boy is going to be killed. So he just ignores him, and he lets that boy live. So they take that one ISIS fighter out of the crowd. And I think what happens is the ISIS fighters are all like, you traitor to that guy, And then I don't know exactly if they'll just kill all the ISIS fighters right then and there, if they'll just gun them down or not, or if they'll like arrest them or send them to some kind of prison camp or whatever. I kind of don't want to do that, though. I'd kind of rather they just kill them, even though I don't know if that happened so much in real life, and I don't know if that'd be a good way to present it, because that could be horrific, just like whatever, 100 ISIS fighters just killing them all unarmed, just gunning them all down. But at the same time, I think, these people deserve it. I think they take the one ISIS fighter out of the group, and whether they kill all those people or not, whatever they do with them, for now, I'm just kind of thinking I want them all to get gunned down. Then what happens is, some people, like some of the Yazidis, may be asking, like, you're going to let this one guy live? And either Trevor or this other character, her name is Layla. She's like commander of the Kurdish Women's Special Forces, Layla. She's in the area. She comes into the area from Syria. So I think what happens, the Yazidis will kind of be asking, so you're going to let this one ISIS fighter live or whatever? And either Trevor or Layla will like ask, like, did this man like assault any of you, like, all the women there? Did this man victimize any of you? Did this man harm any of you? And, no one will say anything. No one recognizes him. So you think maybe this is an innocent guy. But then I think that girl, the younger girl, the one who's going to wind up joining the Kurdish fighters and stuff, I think she will show up and say, yes, I do. He assaulted me. And that guy will be like, no, I didn't. You're mistaken. It wasn't me. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. And so then what I think will happen is Layla, the Kurdish women's general, is she will basically say, like, you're sure that this is the man who hurt you? And the girl, the 18-year-old girl or however old she is, she's going to say, that's him, he's bad. He hurt me. And so what I think will happen, I don't know exactly whether it'll be Layla or Trevor, but I think it'll probably be Layla. I think she will actually say, like, if you are sure about this, she will actually give that girl her gun, her rifle, and that girl, whoever she is, the Yazidi girl, the one guy, he'll be like, no, please, I'm innocent, she's mistaken, and Trevor, I think, will like hit that guy like in the knee to make him, go down to his knees, because I think that'll be more Trevor's act. Instead of like actually giving the gun to this girl, I think Trevor will just get that guy on his knees like, no, you're not going anywhere, buddy. And then that girl will shoot that guy like at least 3 times. I think she shoots him once, and then she kind of walks up to him and shoots him twice more. And that's like her revenge for, his assaults on her. So this guy who you were thinking like, maybe this guy's actually a good guy, maybe he's one of the rare guys in ISIS who actually deep down is a good guy. You find out, no, this guy is the guy who assaulted this one girl. And so she shoots him dead. And that's how Layla knows that this guy was guilty, because this girl is like willing to shoot this guy dead. So she knows this is real. This guy is bad, And so then what'll happen, and again, this is kind of just summarizing the act or whatever, is Layla will kind of, talk that girl into joining, the fighting. But I don't want to exactly say it like that, because Layla will kind of say like, look, like, Layla will say, this is a real dangerous thing we're doing, we face death every day, and Layla is really convinced she herself is going to die in battle. So she's going to tell this girl like, war is horrific, and, it's about killing and stuff, and that are you sure that this is kind of the path you want to go down? But if you are willing, this is a fight that will never end. We need to stand up. Women need to stand up. And again, that's really part of Layla's character. I'm sorry, I keep pointing in this mouse, but I'm just trying to like graphically kind of represent stuff visually. Layla really makes clear to this girl, like, if you want to do this, this could be your whole life. You could either do that, or you could go away. You could go into Syria, or you could go elsewhere into Iraq, or you could go up into Turkey, or go into Europe or whatever. You could have some kind of a life. Or if you want to fight ISIS, we will train you. We will train you to be a fighter. And I've completely lost Mosul and stuff. Oh, there's Sinjar. So yeah, that's kind of the arc, is that girl will decide like, okay, this is the life I want. I want to fight ISIS. I want to kill all of these guys. They are barbaric guys. I want to take the fight to them. I want to get rid of every single one of those ISIS fighters. So that's the arc for this girl. And in the end, she's going to appear in Atlantis Dislodged as well, because she's going to be alongside Trevor. So this is really kind of, in my mind, is, what I think is a strong female character, where she becomes a fighter. And it's born out of her past, where her father is killed, her brother is killed, her sister is given a forced abortion and probably disappears, never to be seen again, or is killed or whatever. And her mother is probably killed as well. So ISIS kills her whole family and, hundreds of people, hundreds of her people. So she decides, okay, I am going to become a fighter. So, how much did I actually say? Where am I? Yazidi Christian scene in Sinjar, father is shot, blah, blah, blah. So I think that is all good. Okay, so this is a Mosul. Okay, the last scene was the Yazidi Christian scene, so that is set up now. I don't really think I need much of a scene about this second ISIS general moving on the Mosul dam. I mean, I don't really think I need a chapter all about that. So I just realized I have not introduced Trevor yet in Act 2. This is the ISIS generals. This is a Tom Marsh scene. This is the Yazidi girl scene. So I have not shown Trevor yet at all. So I need to check in with Trevor again. I think he's in Erbil over here. What to do with him? Because right now he's presumably with the Kurds, but I don't know who he would be with. So the only Kurd I've introduced with him so far is the guy Firat, right here, Firat Malazada. So I'm thinking potentially I could instead of having Trevor with Firat, because, Firat is probably busy. I think Firat would be down here in Tikrit or whatever, because he's working to help protect Baghdad from ISIS, because that's the whole point of, Trevor. If you saw the first video, Trevor was in Tikrit. He drove up to Kirkuk. That's where he met Firat. And Firat agreed to take his forces and attack Tikrit. So Firat is probably down around Baghdad somewhere trying to save Baghdad from falling to ISIS. So what I could do is I could have Trevor be in Firat's house in Erbil. And that way I could have Trevor meet more of the Malazada family, Firat's family, because they're going to have a major role in Act 4 of the book when the Kurds have a referendum for independence. It's going to be, Trevor's largely going to be interacting with the Malazada family. They're kind of the main powerful, corrupt family in Iraqi Kurdistan. So if I have Trevor staying at Firat's house, Firat could have invited him up there. And, I could set that up in Act 1 where, Firat could say something once you're done here, you could head to my house in Erbil or whatever. Or when we meet Trevor in Act 2, I could just reveal that he's staying at that guy Firat's house. That guy is down in Baghdad, but maybe he invited him to stay in his house, And again, that would show, Trevor why he's likes the Kurds so much. So while he is there at Firat's house, one, I could introduce other members of the Malazada family. I mean, Trevor could meet with, all the, high profile family members. Maybe he's meeting the main guy here. Let's see. So this guy Malik is going to be the future president of Kurdistan. He is not Firat's brother. I think it's his cousin, because Malik is the son of Rebaz and Firat is the son of Arjun. So Firat's dad is Arjun. Who's Arjun? Son of father of Chapi. So yeah, I don't actually say who Arjun is. But Malik's dad, Rebaz, do I have something here? Husband, darn it, I don't have anything for him either. I thought that I had something for current Kurdish president, Rafik Salani. So this is another thing. There are several different Kurdish tribes, different Kurdish families. So the Salani family, that's someone I could introduce, somehow. Then I have these political parties, and I mentioned in the comments of my first video, People's Front of Kurdistan, Kurdistan People's Front, Kurdistan Popular People's Front. That is like a direct reference to Monty Python, Life of Brian, where there's like the People's Front of Judea, Judean People's Front, and Judean Popular People's Front. And so they're just kind of making fun of that in Life of Brian. So I wanted to do the same thing where, these Kurdish families all have their own political party. So the Malazada family, their party is the People's Front of Kurdistan. The Salani family, who I introduced right here, the current president, that's the Kurdistan People's Front. And then Hurman Hilmi, I haven't introduced him yet, I think. But yeah, so that's just, they're all rival families, rival tribes, and they're really just working against each other instead of, uniting over a common cause and Kurdish nationalism and everything. They have their own separate interests, and it's just the families competing against each other and trying to deny each other power, So that's going to really be a focus of Act 4. But this is something I could definitely set up if Trevor is in Erbil, which is kind of like the capital. I could have him meet several members of the Malazada family, the Salani family, the Hilmi family, or even if you don't meet them, they could just kind of be talking about them. And again, the main one is the Malazada family. And so that will just kind of be setting up a little bit of Act 4. And also, so that way for Act 4, when Trevor goes back to Iraq from Syria, it's not like out of the blue he's just suddenly hanging out with the Malazada family. So it's in this one chapter here when we first meet Trevor in Act 2, where Trevor can already be meeting some of this family, the Malazada family. And so that way when he goes back to Iraq in Act 4, he already kind of has a foot in the door with his family. He already kind of knows of that family, and they already kind of know him. And it's because the guy Firat, met Trevor and likes him, and Trevor likes him in return. But he's going to find out, this family isn't altogether all that good. So I think for chapter 23, we could have a scene, the first scene where we have Trevor in Act 2. So we meet Trevor in Erbil. Is that the way you spell it? Obviously, probably Erbil. Yes. Staying at the house of Firat. Trevor can meet or learn about the Malazada. Did I spell that right? Let's see. Malazada. Let's see. Malazada. Looks right. Trevor can learn about the Malazada family along with the rival families and the current political, political status of Iraqi Kurdistan. Yeah, because Trevor, he may not even know the president of Iraq is a Kurd. So when he learns that, he could kind of think like, oh, good, well, what's the president doing, And so they could kind of explain to him more about, politics in Iraq and, how Iraqi Kurdistan works and how, the president is Kurdish and the prime minister is Shia and all that. And the previous vice president was Sunni. So there's a lot they could talk about in Erbil. And the main thing I think is Trevor can learn about the Mosul dam falling. And also I suppose maybe he could learn about Sinjar. I don't quite know how I want to do it because I was reading that in real life, the way like the international community kind of became aware of the situation in Sinjar is because there was like a Yazidi royal family member, I guess. I guess they have like royalty for the Yazidi Christians. And so one of them like put out a speech or an address or a report or something talking about what was going on in Sinjar. I wish like on Wikipedia it would have like had more about that prince, because I looked it up and there was very little information. I mean, it basically just said that, this Yazidi royal like filmed something like just talking about, the situation in Sinjar. So it didn't say like if he was in Sinjar or if he was in, Erbil, or if he was out of the country entirely, because I consider like adding that, just because, I don't really know exactly how I should do it then. Like, is the guy in Lebanon or something, or is he in another town here? I know I could just make it up, but I don't know. One thing, again, I don't know how much I talked about this. I think I mentioned it a little bit, but like this town Babira, what happened? I looked it up, and like that town is actually largely Yazidi, populated by Yazidis. And I looked up another town. I'm not sure which one. But I think the other town I looked up, just one of these neighboring towns, was largely Assyrian. So I think these towns are all kind of pretty ethnically diverse, maybe. Like maybe there's a Kurdish town, maybe there's an Assyrian town, maybe there's a Yazidi town. And so I think Trevor, when he goes to like gather reinforcements to make a move on the Mosul Dam, he could kind of go around to all these different towns and, find out that, oh, this is an Assyrian town, this is a Yazidi town and all that. And the Yazidi town, they could really want to, move on Sinjar and rescue the Yazidis. So, I mean, it's possible I could have, like, the royal prince guy. I mean, maybe he lives in this town, Babira. So, I mean, maybe it's possible that while Trevor is in Erbil, maybe he hears something about this prince up in Babira saying like, we need help. And also because this guy's Yazidi, he could mention that Sinjar fell to ISIS, and he could mention that ISIS has taken over the Mosul Dam and is moving eastward into all these towns. And so Trevor, again, right now, the guy Firat, he is down in Baghdad. So there isn't really a Kurdish military that Trevor can bring to Mosul Dam. So I think potentially Trevor can just kind of tell Firat's family that, once he hears about this prince, he could kind of decide, okay, well, I think maybe I'll go and check that area out, Maybe they can also say something like, the military may be on their way as well, like more of the Kurdish military, that they should be, moving on the area as well. So it's not just like the Kurds just tell Trevor like, okay, well, see ya. Firat's family is really close with the Kurdish military. So, I mean, they are a little bit more aggressive than some of the other like Kurdish families and stuff. And like, the other Malazada families and stuff. I mean, the other members of the family. So Firat's family is definitely a little bit more willing to fight ISIS. So they could kind of tell Trevor like, okay, well, we'll spread the word that we may send help to this area. So that way it's not so much like Trevor is just going totally on his own. Even though he does go on his own, he still kind of believes that other members of the Malazada family or the Kurdish military, like the Peshmerga or whatever, he goes kind of thinking, okay, well, they're going to be on their way soon, so I'll just get there, as soon as I can. And so anyway, where did I leave off? Trevor learns about the current status of Iraqi Kurdistan, and then instead of just doing it a separate chapter, I don't really want to do a chapter just of that guy, like the Yazidi royal guy. I think, potentially in the future, depending on how large of a role he has in the book, I may want to create more of a backstory for him. But for now, I think that would kind of detract from the main story. It'd just be another character we would have to learn, another chapter to read. So I think we could just learn that in Trevor's chapter. So I'll just say Trevor gets word from a Yazidi prince in, there's Nibbler, my baby, Babira with an H, in Babira, that gets word from a Yazidi prince in Babira about the situation in Sinjar and the Mosul dam. Trevor decides to set out for Babira to respond to the ISIS incursion. And again, I mentioned this in the first video, even though at this point Trevor isn't really willing and wanting to directly, take the fight to ISIS, he does want to rally the Kurds, and he wants to, help the Kurds and, however possible. Mainly he's thinking with medical aid, because that's a little bit more of his background recently, is more medical related stuff. So he could go up here thinking, I could provide humanitarian aid to them, I could do little battlefield triage stuff, treat several wounds and stuff. He can apply a cast, he can do amputations if needed. So Trevor can kind of do some medical related stuff. So that's more his thinking. But then when he gets here, he kind of, the military isn't there because they're more to the south. So, there's no one to stop ISIS, and they're on their way moving east. And I thought there was something I could do, because I was thinking that ISIS has already been in the town. Maybe they've already done something. Maybe they showed up and, did something bad, whatever, and then left. But, they're going to return. Oh, I remembered what I was going to do. So for this town, Babira, I mentioned earlier in the video about the idea of ISIS destroying all the historical monuments and stuff, and how I was going to think, I won't really get into that until Act 3. Well, so I was going to have Trevor maybe go to this town, Babira, and right here somewhere, I think, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's this town, Tel Suf. The local Christian Assyrians were then able to restore the crosses atop their vandalized churches. So for this town, Teskopa and Babira, it also mentions the Yazidi holy sites. So when Trevor goes there to meet with this royal dude, he could learn then that ISIS is destroying all these monuments and stuff. So even though it's not going to be a focus yet for the book, he could learn about it, because there's all sorts of monastery thing you could see there. There's a mosque, there's another mosque, there's another mosque. So it's at that point where Trevor can learn that ISIS is destroying a lot of historical stuff. So even though it's not going to be a focus yet, at least that is a natural point to introduce this. That, oh, by the way, do you know what ISIS is doing? Destroying all these, monuments and, churches and mosques and archaeological sites and everything. So that could be part of the plot. That's when I could begin to reveal that. And again, right there, Babira is populated by Yazidis. I definitely think that is enough for this chapter. I don't really think I want to do another Trevor chapter like back to back, I could jump back to the Yazidi girl scene. So like maybe I could break this chapter up, because again, I don't want to show like, graphic detail about what's happening to her. So I mean, I don't want to show like, check in with this girl, hours after her assault or whatever, I don't want to show that. So maybe I could just break this chapter up. So I mean it could be several chapters. I mean, the first chapter could just kind of show her with her family, and then, ISIS shows up and, maybe they hide or something. And then the second chapter with her could be where her father is shot. Maybe the third chapter, like her and her mother and sister watches her brother is buried alive, all of that. So I don't know exactly how much I should break it up, and it depends on like how much I wind up writing. So, shoot, I really have no clue, because I mean, again, just the first scene where we meet her could be its own chapter. Father is shot. I don't know if I'll keep this at all this way, but for now, just like for space and all that, I'll just kind of assume I can make this its own chapter, Yazidi Christian scene in Sinjar. Yazidi Christian scene in Sinjar. I wish I could just name her right now, but I don't have a name for her yet. So I'll just write that we meet, I'll just say her because I'll know who I'm talking about. We meet her family and see, and then ISIS shows up. Okay, so then I don't know if I should have more than that. I guess it doesn't matter for now, so I'll just keep it for now. The Yazidi girl's father is shot, and brother is buried alive. Again, I don't know exactly how much I'm going to break this up. So again, for now, I will just keep this as it is, just one chapter, and then, maybe in a few minutes I'll move it down more. So anyway, now we could have the scene where Trevor arrives in... what's happening? What was the town? Babira. And learns more about the situation with the Yazidis and the Mosul Dam. He also learns about ISIS demolishing historical sites. Okay, now, I don't really want to jump right back to that girl, although I could, just so that, she's kept in the forefront. Kind of my concern with that a little bit is that, maybe potentially readers could get tired of reading about her. Just like, oh, another scene with this girl. And like, why are we learning about this girl when she is way over here and Trevor is way over here? So I don't know. Let's see. What was the last chapter with the girl? Her father is shot. Her brother is buried alive. I don't know. I don't really know right at this point if I want to have another chapter with her. I'm kind of wanting to more expand the book into other things. Oh, one thing I've not talked about at all in this video is what does William Barrett do? Because in the book, I have a British captain named William Barrett who appears in every Trevor Knight book. And what he basically does, he's a British captain. He has a battleship called the HMS Resilient. In each book, he fights, some kind of a naval battle. So German derelict, he takes out a couple of Iranian frigates. Egyptian demise, he fights the Egyptians. Syrian dander, he actually attacks Turkey. Ottoman destiny, he attacks Turkey again. Arabian Dawn, he has a battle off the coast of Aden here, or off the coast of Yemen or whatever. When Arabian Dawn ended, William Barrett was taking his ship up to, I'm not sure where. I think one of these places up here. I don't know exactly where. I need to check. So William Barrett is somewhere in the Arabian Gulf, which I call it. I never knew that Google Maps had parentheses here, Arabian Gulf, because in the Trevor Knight series, I refer to it as the Arabian Gulf, and that's something I talk about in German Derelict. In German Derelict, I decided to call this body of water the Arabian Gulf because calling it the Persian Gulf gives it to Iran. And I wanted to kind of do something that, against Iran. So I decided to name this body of water the Arabian Gulf, giving it to Saudi Arabia and, Bahrain, Qatar. I don't know if that's a way to say it because I heard recently like people saying Qatar, and I just don't like that. I like it being Qatar. I don't like it being Qatar. But I don't know, maybe that is the right way to pronounce it, is Qatar. But still, I'll probably say Qatar. Just that's the way I like it. It just sounds better to me. I don't even want to go off on that tangent. But anyway, so yeah, Arabian Gulf. So William Barrett is somewhere here. And again, I'm apologizing for mentioning it now, but this is just something I have not considered is what is William Barrett doing? I imagine he's got to fight someone here. I introduced this guy in Arabian Dawn. He's like the brother of a terrorist in Yemen who gets killed, and he kind of has a vendetta against the British. I was going to say that maybe that guy tries to destroy the Resilient, wherever it is over here. But I just realized that guy, it's not like he has a personal vendetta against William Barrett and the HMS Resilient. So I don't think it would make sense that he would go over here to the Gulf to, find Barrett and the Resilient to attack it, because what I was originally kind of considering was he could try to launch a boat or something laden with explosives into the Resilient. But thinking about it now, why wouldn't he just attack another British warship down here, because this is where he lives, is in Yemen. So why would he go all the way up here pursuing Barrett and the Resilient when he really has no personal vendetta against them specifically? He would just want to attack some ship going through here, through the Gulf of Aden. So I don't think that guy is a possibility. So that kind of leaves only a few people. I mean, ISIS does not have a navy. I mean, they may have one patrol boat or something in some kind of body of water in here or something. They may have a dinghy or something. That's the bulk of the ISIS navy. So ISIS does not have a navy, so it's got to be either Iran or I don't know who else. I just do not know any pretext with which Iran could want to attack the HMS Resilient, even though in German Derelict, that's the first time William Barrett, his first ship he sinks or whatever, is an Iranian ship. So they could potentially learn that, the HMS Resilient is in the area. And I don't know, because I don't think Iran would attack him, because, that's an act of war. If they did that, the Americans and British would send a whole bunch of forces to the area, and they'd probably take out all of Iran's SAM sites along the coast and take out whatever they have for a navy. That would be a massive retaliation if Iran was to launch some kind of an attack against the HMS Resilient in revenge for what happens in German Derelict when the Resilient fires on a couple Iranian ships. I could have it be where the Houthis launch missiles, because the Houthis, they actually have a different name in the book. Yemen is kind of a puppet of Iran, but again, I don't really see why they would do that. And again, it would be a massive retaliation. If they were to do that, then the Americans and British would respond hard against Yemen. So they're out. Could the Iraqis do it? That's actually something to consider, because maybe like the prime minister guy, the one I was talking about, who's loses favor. Tom Marsh meets with blah 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 to delegitimize the prime minister of Iraq. Maybe that guy. I don't know. Basically, what I'm thinking, just to complete this thought, is maybe he actually launches some kind of an attack against the Resilient, but then he could say like, oh, it was an accident or something. But that's just really sketchy, and that just seems really far-fetched. But kind of the reason I thought of that is because during the Iraq-Iran war, Saddam Hussein, apparently an Iraqi fighter, launched a couple missiles at a United States ship that was in the Gulf and struck this ship with a couple missiles. And then, the Iraqis kind of said something like, oh, we thought it was an Iranian ship or something. So, I mean, that same pretext wouldn't work. I mean, if the Iraqi prime minister said, oh, I thought it was an Iranian ship or something, he is not at war with Iran, and that guy likes Iran. Something I was considering is that maybe John Walters could actually, basically have that be a false flag attack, where maybe like John Walters, maybe he coordinates with CIA to do an attack against the British, and then to blame the Iraqi prime minister and said, oh, he did it. But then that guy would absolutely deny it. I mean, he'd just flat out, say, this is a lie. I did not do that. And he'd be right. He'd be honest. And so I don't really like that too much. I like the idea that this is something they would do because they want to get rid of this guy because he's a puppet of Iran. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense that they could say, oh, maybe this prime minister attacked because Iran told him to, because, he's so much in the pocket of Iran. Ooh, I may be onto something here. Since the Resilient attacked Iran in German derelict, like I say, there is reason why Iran would want to hit that ship. But like I said, if Iran did that, they would know it would be a massive response. I mean, that'd be like a war against Iran worthy response. So maybe what John Walters cooks up is that their plot could be basically that since Iran wants to hit the HMS Resilient, but they know if they do that, it would be the cause of a war, maybe John Walters and stuff and CIA and stuff come up with this plan where they could say the Iranians told this prime minister to attack the ship and then just claim it's an accident. So it's like Iran having the prime minister attack the ship so that Iran could get revenge, but it's not Iran doing it. It would be this Iraqi prime minister. So that could be like John Walters and stuff pretext to get rid of this prime minister. But I don't know, is that just too far-fetched? Because again, they would know, the prime minister would know he did not do that. All of the Iraqi military would know they did not do that. I mean, you could have all these countries like Qatar or whatever, Saudi Arabia, they could they would know there was no Iraqi, jet or whatever heading to that area, or that there was no Iraqi missile fired. And besides, where would they fire it from? I mean, arguably, the Americans have bases in Iraq. So, I mean, maybe arguably the Americans could fire it themselves. And so that way the missile does look like it comes from Iraq. But I don't know. This is all just sounding too far-fetched. I kind of like the idea, but at the same time, it's really far-fetched. And I don't know. I like that the Americans are kind of doing something villainous just so that the Americans are, always the good guys. The Americans are doing something, they're doing all of this just because they want to get rid of this prime minister because he is a friend of Iran. So it just seems like that the Americans so badly want to get rid of this prime minister that they would actually fire a missile at a British warship. I like that, but it just seems so far-fetched. What other options would I have, though, to have some kind of a naval battle? Okay, reading up on Iran-United Kingdom relations, just because looking for ideas. One thing I think that's interesting, I'm not sure if I'm going to use this, but it talks about at least 7 British arms dealers have been supplying the Iranian Air Force. It's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the country's controversial nuclear ambitions, and so on. So there's definitely some United Kingdom people, British people smuggling stuff to Iran, so I could use that. Also, something that I saw was there's this incident in 2011. This book is set in 2014, where they stormed the British embassy in Tehran, forcing staff to flee, and the UK closed its embassy and ordered the Iranian embassy closed. So I could do that, but that's a bit older historically. Thank you, baby. Then I also saw that since 2011, Iran has threatened to block the Strait of Hormuz, which is right here, I think. Strait of Hormuz. Wow. I'm getting good at my zooming in. He said any attempt by Iran to block the waterway in retaliation for sanctions against its oil exports would be illegal and unsuccessful. So what is happening is Iran is running equipment both to Yemen because they have allies there, and also to Syria because their president there is kind of a puppet of Iran as well. So maybe there's been some more. There was a ship. Where to go? One thing I saw that right here, this is about 2014-ish. It talks about how following the election of the Iranian president, the United Kingdom and Iran are actually kind of getting closer toward getting along, and they reopened their embassy. So that is happening about this time. But I don't really want to go into that, where I talk about how the embassy was closed for a couple years or whatever. I don't know, maybe I'll mention it kind of in passing, but definitely not like a main point of the plot. Right here it says that the British Prime Minister and the Iranian President actually meet at the United Nations in September of 2014, which is exactly when the book is set right now. So that is like going on now. So I could show that scene where you meet the British, it's showing Ireland, the British Prime Minister and the Iranian President. They could meet in New York or whatever. I don't know if the scene is in New York. It just says they meet at the sidelines of the United Nations. It doesn't say where. It might say if I click that, but I don't really want to click that. Okay, I think this is kind of more closer toward what I'm looking for. So the British boarded the Iranian owned tanker off the coast of Gibraltar, but I don't want to show that. Gibraltar right over there. Gosh, my zooming in is getting good, even though Gibraltar is very easy. I could have something where there's a ship somewhere. Since it says that Royal Marines board it, maybe that does happen in Gibraltar. So basically what was happening is there's this ship that was supposed to be heading for Syria, but then I wonder, why the heck was it in Gibraltar? Because how did it get to Gibraltar? It would have to go like from Iran all the way around Africa to Gibraltar, all the way to Syria. That seems like a very long roundabout way to get to Syria. Because again, Iran, they're, sending stuff to Syria and Yemen and stuff. And also, I think they're pretty close with Lebanon as well. So what I'm thinking is Iran could be sending stuff, so maybe the British do take over a ship somewhere. I don't know where. I don't really want it to be Gibraltar, but they could take over a ship somewhere. I don't really know if William Barrett should do it. Maybe he could. I don't know, just so that I could introduce him more. But I'm also thinking I could do it with some other ship and crew or whatever. And so what happens in response to that is it says somewhere about, I think maybe right here. Let's see, this is July 2019. Yeah. So the Swedish-owned but British-flagged oil tanker had been seized by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in the Strait of Hormuz. This was 2019, so it's like 5 years after this book is set. But I could do this, I don't care. During the incident, the HMS whatever was stationed too far away to allow for timely assistance. HMS Duncan, I think that's a type 45. So this is actually like one of the ships William Barrett is currently captaining? No, actually, he's not at this point. William Barrett is commanding the HMS Resilient again. He was commanding a Type 45, but not anymore. Now he's back in command of the Resilient. So that wouldn't be his type of ship. Anyway, so the British could take over a ship somewhere because they think it's sending aid or whatever to Syria or Yemen or whoever, whichever. But I would probably have it in this case be Syria, since Trevor Knight's going to go to Syria in Act 3. It makes more sense to kind of reiterate that, what is going on in Syria. So that would make better sense. So the British could take over an Iranian ship, and in response, the Iranians could take over a ship here in the Strait of Hormuz. And I think William Barrett is in Oman. That's where the Resilient is like undergoing some repairs and stuff. So William Barrett is somewhere here in Oman, and then the ship is taken here in the Strait of Hormuz. So maybe the Resilient could start heading that way, but it's too late. The Iranian government later stated it had issued no assurances that oil would not be delivered to Syria. Oh, crude oil had been sold to an unnamed buyer in Mersin, Turkey. So what they could do is Iran could say like, okay, we're not going to sell, they could take over that ship, whatever, they each take over ships. Then Iran could say, okay, we're not going to take that oil to Syria, but then they take it to Mersin in Turkey, and Turkey could, they wouldn't give it to the Syrian regime though, because Turkey is actually like currently, working to overthrow that guy. So, an unnamed buyer, that does not mean it has to be the actual Turkish government. It could be, someone else entirely. I mean, it could be a pro-Iranian guy I was doing the wrong town, Mersin. So even though it's going into Turkey, it could be going to like a pro-Iranian Turk, and then he could run it to Syria instead. Meanwhile, I need to have William Barrett get in some kind of a battle. And I'm so sorry I'm not talking about Act 2, but this is just something I realized I hadn't even considered yet, is what's William Barrett doing? How do I get him involved? So if that ship is taken somewhere into Iranian waters, would William Barrett actually pursue it, even like into Iranian waters? I don't know. Because that's just asking for an international incident, and that would be justification for Iran to attack the Resilient. But would they? And what would the British response be to that? Or could the British be daring them to do that? Like, okay, go ahead. This is the HMS Resilient. This is like the most powerful ship in our arsenal, So we're going to park it right off your coast, and you either let our ship go or go ahead and attack our ship, and see what happens, F around and find out, The British could do that. And I kind of like that. And so maybe the Iranians do mount some kind of an attack on the ship, and hence William Barrett does get in a battle. But then again, that would, be the prelude or whatever to a major conflict. It could just be that the Resilient just has an overwhelming victory, and the Iranians kind of eat crow, Maybe they're like, okay, you can have your ship back, We're not going to be a problem. We don't want a war. So they could do that. And the British, they're not going to want to have a, invasion of Iran. And also the American president, Ramsey, he's not going to want to invade Iran. So maybe this is just sort of like a skirmish, It's not like no one here wants a war. So then maybe then I could have the meeting where the Iranian president meets with the British prime minister or whatever in New York, and that's when they could kind of talk. And I think it'd be kind of just a shorter scene where they would kind of say neither of us wants a war. They could both be united right now fighting ISIS because, neither of them, the British and the Iranians, they both don't like ISIS. And maybe from there, I could have the bit about, Iran could reopen, or whatever, the British could reopen their embassy in Iran and some other stuff. And, Iran could say that ship that was taken over by the British will not go to Syria, but then they take it up to Mersin and someone from there takes it to Syria. So that way, I could have the scene in New York where they agree okay, we don't want a war here. Let's just, you give our ship back and we'll give you your ship back. And that's it. So William Barrett gets his battle. When to have that, I do not know. So anyway, I'm not going to write it anywhere down here because since I talked about it, I have a recording of it. So I don't think I need to have any kind of notes for that. So that's just something to consider. At some point, all this can happen. It might happen in Act 4 because that's when, all the stuff with Iraqi Kurdistan and stuff. So I don't know. There's all sorts of different stuff going on there. So maybe I could kind of slip it in there at some point. I don't know. Right now, it's not an issue. I mean, the main thing is the Mosul Dam and Sinjar, So I don't want to have this whole scene about all this stuff between the British and the Iranians. That would just be a major, major distraction. So for now, let's just get back to Act 2. Now, where were we in Act 2? Trevor arrives in Babira and learns ISIS is demolishing historical sites. So I think where I was at was what's the next scene. So I didn't want to do another scene with a girl necessarily, because I kind of want to, give that a little bit time to simmer. So I could do something with the Iraqi prime minister or something with Sinjar. No, not yet. I have an idea for that, but I don't really want to do that yet. I really need to gear up for the Mosul Dam. So the last scene was with Trevor. I could have a scene with the ISIS guy, but I don't really think I need that. Let's see. Wow, we're already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chapters in. ISIS general, I don't need something with that. I could check in somehow with how they are working to delegitimize the prime minister, because I think, like I say, part of the idea is the prime minister is not being helpful. So they want to get rid of him, and I want to have that done sooner rather than later. But I don't exactly know how they would do that. Oh, I think, I don't want to click over to it and open it or whatever, but for the prime minister, I think part of what may have made him fall, kind of. Let's see. I think it's something about, oh heck, I don't know. I'll have to look it up. al-Malaki. It says something about what really made him fall. The Iraq military is struggling. A former commander accused al-Malaki of being the one who issued the order to withdraw from the city of Mosul. So the Iraqi general, that's like the Sunni guy that I mentioned, if I can find it, Sunni general Qadim Husni. So he could come out and say that the prime minister is the one who said, flee for your lives. That's kind of a Return of the King reference. That general, he's a Sunni Muslim, Qadim Husni, and the prime minister is a Shia. So, this guy, this general, does not presumably like the prime minister. This guy, this Iraqi general, he went to Mosul and he had an army with him, like however many men, 3,000 or whatever. And basically the Iraqi army just began fleeing from Mosul as soon as ISIS arrived. So this general says the prime minister gave the order to retreat. So that could be like a major scandal. Then, just to kind of tie things together, once he does that, then I could have a scene where something like John Walters or someone connected with him could pay off that general. So, that whole accusation that the prime minister gave the order to retreat, that could be from John Walters. His plan to delegitimize the prime minister of Iraq. So that could be their plan. They paid off this general to say that the prime minister is the one who gave the order to retreat. And that would be a lot less far-fetched or whatever than my plot to have them launch a missile at the Resilient and blame the prime minister and say that whatever. This is something where he would have no way to refute this, like just this Iraqi general saying the prime minister gave the order to retreat. A lot of people would believe that because the prime minister is a Shia Muslim. But then why would he do that? Because he does not like the Sunnis, and, why would he, he doesn't want to get conquered. So inherently that does not make much sense. But the whole idea is this prime minister is known as inept. He is not handling ISIS well. So when this general says the prime minister told the army to retreat, even though that doesn't really make sense, why would he do that? Iran doesn't want the country to fall to ISIS. But the Iraqis, I think, would kind of believe that because they know this prime minister is in good with Iran and he's been very anti-Sunni Muslim. And so this Sunni general, a lot of the people would have sympathy for him. They would not have sympathy for the prime minister so much because they do kind of see him as a puppet of Iran. So this would make sense to the people. That, the prime minister is the one who, the reason we keep losing to ISIS is because of the prime minister. So I think that would be very believable, and that is kind of what really brought down al-Malaki in real life. So I think this all makes sense that the general, I'll just start writing it down. So I don't know exactly how this will happen, but I'll just say Iraqi general declares that the prime minister of Iraq is the one who gave the order to withdraw from Mosul. Public support around the prime minister crumbles. And then I guess I should have a scene where someone from John Walters' organization pays off the Iraqi general. So that is the American plot. So the Americans pay this general to lie to get rid of the prime minister so that they could get someone who isn't so friendly with Iran. That seems like a much more believable plot. So I like it because it just kind of shows, the Americans are, just playing politics. They don't like that Iran is close with his prime minister, so they want to get rid of him. So it's just kind of, Americans, intervening with everything, They always want to have their chosen guy in charge. So, is that all written? I think that looks good. So, I think at this point I should check back in with the girl. So, I think this scene with her father being shot could be the first half of a chapter, and then the brother being buried alive is the second half of the chapter, and that is where the chapter ends. So the first scene in the chapter will show about the father, then there'll be a paragraph gap space, a section break or whatever, and then it'll continue back, with the rest of the family, and then you'll see the scene where the brother is buried alive. I think that second part will go down there, get rid of that, and then I'll just say older. I'll just type in Yazidi just so I don't get confused. Older Yazidi daughter gets a forced abortion. I could change it to sister, but I'll just keep it daughter for now. It doesn't matter. Older daughter gets a forced abortion, mother is sold, younger daughter. Again, I could break up that chapter later. And I kind of like that idea because that way it'll keep, the Yazidi situation in readers' minds. Just like with Act 1, how I kind of check in a few times with the SAT team, because that's the main purpose of Act 1 is all of this is, to rescue the SAT team. That's like the end goal. So for Act 2, the end goal is to rescue the Yazidis. So it makes sense that we keep checking in with this family. So we meet them the first time, then the second time the father is shot and the brother is buried alive. Then the third time we meet them, one of the girls gets a forced abortion. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if I'm going to break up that chapter further. But again, like I said, I'm not showing any of the assault that they're actually enduring or whatever. Because I don't want to show those scenes about, any of these girls getting assaulted or whatever. I just don't want to do it. I've already had scenes like that in Syrian Dander and Keeping Fire. So I don't want to have any kind of graphic scenes like that. Oh, darn it. Where's Mosul? Mosul, there it is up there. Oh, yeah, there. Okay, so I kind of need to speed this up a bit. So I have not had a scene with Trevor, a chapter with Trevor in a few chapters. So I don't know exactly how I'll do this, but I want to have Trevor rallies local villages to fight ISIS. Here's the thing, I kind of wanted to make that more of a plot point where he's really struggling to get people to join in this fight. But just looking at the chapters, I can't have, a whole bunch of chapters where Trevor's struggling to find allies and, get people to fight. Because I'm already, running low on space, or the book would just be way too long, or I'd have to condense all this stuff down, which I don't really want to do. So, I don't know exactly how I'll pull it off, but definitely there'll be some resistance, especially from the Kurds, I think. But at the same time, I don't want to drag it out too long because, how I said, this is probably the third day or so since ISIS took over that dam, and then the Kurds, in real life, on day 7 or whatever, they showed up and fought. And also something I have not introduced yet in the book is that, the Americans help with airstrikes, and they're nowhere close to doing that yet. I haven't set that up yet at all, the pretext for that too much, because I do kind of have an idea for how to help, inspire that. But for now, Trevor, I don't know if he does rally local villages to fight ISIS. Maybe they're not willing to, So maybe Trevor tries to rally local villages to fight ISIS, but finds, I don't want to say no help or whatever, no one willing, but finds little support. I don't know. I don't really like the way this is worded, but basically I'm trying to say, they don't just like all jump aboard and say, yeah, let's go. They're all, we're not soldiers, we're not fighters. And he's waiting to hear from the Kurds, but the Kurds aren't showing up yet. They're still kind of occupied. Then, to talk about something I haven't introduced yet, is I have an idea to have some journalists want to go check out the Sinjar Mountains. This was like originally one of the very first ideas I had for this when I heard about like the Sinjar Mountains, even though I thought they were like up here somewhere, is that in the series, I have a character named Heidi Barnum. You first meet her in Egyptian Demise when she's a reporter documenting the Egyptian Revolution in 2012. She is, I think, an Australian reporter. And she also makes another appearance in Keeping Fire, which is set, I think, in the book, it is set in 2009, I believe, even though in real life, like the Chibok schoolgirl kidnappings happened in 2014, I kind of want to say. Oh man, I'm kind of sorry, I don't remember exactly what year it was. I think it was 2014 though. But anyway, so I have her in Nigeria in 2009 and then in Egypt in 2011, I want to say. So my idea is that she is one of the ones who wants to document what's going on in Sinjar. What I was going to do was, so what happens is like she gets Trevor Knight to fly her in a helicopter over the Sinjar Mountains so she could film it and stuff, so she could report on it. And what was going to happen was like her reporting helps make the world aware of what's going on, even though this Yazidi prince, oh my gosh, where am I? Where's Mosul? There it is. Even though this Yazidi prince, I think oh man, I just lost Mosul again. This prince in Babira, I think that's where the prince is, and Trevor meets with him. Even though he had his speech or whatever, it's not like global news yet. Because, it's still one prince guy, and he's, I don't even think in Sinjar, I think he's in Babira. So it's not like capturing international news yet. What needs to happen is to actually have like footage of it, that'll really make the world aware of what's going on. I think Heidi will have Trevor fly her in a helicopter over the mountains, so they'll film it, and then because of that, the world will become aware of the situation in Sinjar, and that will cause basically all these countries to intervene, namely the Americans with airstrikes. And like I say, it kind of has to begin with the Mosul Dam, because they have to fight their way to Sinjar, because basically ISIS has all of this, already occupied. Darn it, now I lost Sinjar. There it is. I swear that mountain looks like something else. So it's real easy to find that mountain, just to find that real distinctive shape. So anyway, I really want the Americans intervening with airstrikes. That's how they retake the Mosul Dam. And like I say, the Kurds fled from the area. But as soon as the Americans begin assisting with airstrikes, then, the Kurds fight. So I think what happens is when Trevor tries to rally the villagers, they tell him, like, no, we're not fighters. We can't defeat ISIS, we're going to die if we do that. And so Trevor gets like a real poor reception. So Trevor tries to rally local villagers to fight ISIS, but finds little support. Then I think what happens is he returns to the Yazidi royal in, what's the town? Babira, and finds Heidi Barnum and oh, I forget the guy's name. I think his name is Paul. Interviewing him, Heidi asks Trevor to fly them over the Sinjar mountains. Then, of course, the question is, well, where does he get a helicopter? Maybe the Yazidi royal. Maybe he has a helicopter, so he could say, like, take mine. Anyway, this is like the first time Heidi and Trevor meet. He does not meet her in Egyptian Demise. And the reason why they don't meet is because originally Heidi Barnum was supposed to be the main love interest in a book set in Japan called Ray Device. And so, Trevor was going to meet her there because she's going to be the love interest. So I deliberately did not have them meet in Egyptian Demise because, then they would have already met in Ray Device. But like I say, I was thinking, I found Mosul pretty easy that time. I was thinking, Heidi is the one who flies over the Sinjar Mountains because she wants to document this. She's a reporter. So it really makes sense that Trevor would actually meet her here in this book. So it does kind of violate or whatever what I was planning to do, having them meet in Ray Device. But I don't think it matters at all. I mean, I may change the plot of that book around a lot, and it won't make it so I can't write the book because now Trevor has already met Heidi. So I don't care that they meet in this book when I was going to have them meet originally in Ray Device. There's Mosul. So Heidi asks Trevor to fly them over the Sinjar Mountains. The royal offers to let them take his helicopter. And the reason he would do that is because he wants, the attention to go to, the Yazidis, what they're dealing with in Sinjar. That's this prince's whole purpose, is to bring attention to their situation. So Heidi and her friend Paul, go to his house to interview the guy because she's a reporter. So it's like, hey, I saw your report about the Sinjar Mountains, so she goes to interview him. And I think when Trevor returns to the house, this is already kind of in the works that, Heidi wants to go check out the mountains. And so anyway, I think it would be a bit risky. How do they get from Babira all the way to the Sinjar Mountains? I mean, ISIS has all this territory already under their control. But I think if they're just flying themselves, it may not attract as much attention. And of course, Trevor may I don't know, because at this point the villagers have turned him down. So Trevor doesn't really have any options. No one's really willing to fight ISIS. They're all running from ISIS. And so, he could be, mentioned that he's trying to get people to fight. And Heidi could say, this is how you do it, because the world will hear about what's going on and they'll step in and they'll help you out. And that's how it happens. Once, the US begins doing airstrikes and stuff, that's when the Kurds really start kicking butt. The royal offers to let them take his helicopter. I was going to say at this point I could have another scene with the Yazidis, but I don't know if I need another one. I mean, I could just break it up right now just because. So let's see here. I guess I could just do another scene with the Yazidis. So older daughter gets a forced abortion, mother and son. It would probably be, the forced abortion would be its own chapter, but I probably wouldn't have enough to go on to do that, a whole chapter just on that. Because again, I don't want to show that in detail at all where you're actually seeing that get done, It's kind of more just alluded to. So then if that's not enough for one chapter, then I'd probably have to throw in the thing with the mother being sold or killed. If this was to be its own chapter, the forced abortion and the mother, then that would make this scene with the younger girl into its own chapter. And again, I can't do that. I don't have enough material to make that its own chapter because, again, I don't want to, show in depth about, whatever, her being bought or assaulted or whatever. It's more kind of, I don't want to say implied because, I do kind of show how it happens, but not showing, any actual assault or anything. You just see like they get a price assigned to them and are told to walk down the street or whatever. And so the chapter may end with whatever, her beginning her walk down the street. So basically, I don't really see how I could break this chapter up into multiple chapters. So I don't think I could do another chapter with her. Is there anything else to do? I could throw in the scene with William Barrett here. Just, it'd be really out of the blue, just like switching to this stuff with the British and this ship that has nothing to do whatsoever with Mosul and Sinjar. But I kind of like it just because it is so much out of the blue. Part of the problem, though, is it just seems like there's a lot of stuff because I need to have the British seize a ship somewhere because it's, carrying something to Syria. And then I'd have to have the Iranians taking over a ship in response, and I'd have to have William Barrett going into Iranian waters and then them attacking him. And then, have that battle and then have the British Prime Minister and the Iranian President meeting. That would just be way too much thrown in. I don't mind it so much if it's, a shorter scene, but that would probably be at least like 15 pages worth of stuff, 20 pages worth of stuff. And I just can't fit that in here. If I was to do like, British scene here where the ship is whatever, and then here's the other thing where like in this chapter where the British take over an Iranian ship. So then the next scene in that same chapter would be the Iranians take over a British ship. And then I guess I'd have like a scene with William Barrett, like chasing after the Iranians. And then maybe like in this chapter, I'd have, the actual battle. And then, that chapter have, the meeting between the president and the prime minister. I would still have to have, Trevor's flight over the Sinjar Mountains and then the battle for... also I need to show the American intervention and all that. And then the battle for the Mosul Dam. Then I'd have to show, them fighting their way to Sinjar. So I don't know, but where else could I have that scene? Should I go ahead and just write it in now? If I don't do that, I could just immediately have another Trevor chapter with Trevor and Heidi and doing the flight. Again, I can't have a scene with the Yazidis. That's pretty much a complete chapter. I can't really break that up very easily. But I need to have William Barrett in the book. So I'll just add it for now. So, British Special Forces. British Special Forces. They have an elite unit of special horses. British Special Forces take over an Iranian ship bound for Syria. Iran takes over a British ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Wow, I spelled it right, apparently. And then William Barrett in Oman sets out to rescue the British ship. I guess that's good enough. So then I'd have Trevor flies high. Wow, I was spelling it right. I thought I was messing it up there. Trevor flies Heidi over the Sinjar Mountains. Oh, then I guess I could check in with William Barrett. So, William Barrett sails into Iranian, I was going to say airspace. What's the opposite? Maritime zone, and a battle ensues. Okay, and then I guess the next scene would be Heidi's report is picked up by the international community. Stephen Knight classifies ISIS's actions in Sinjar as genocide. And then I guess I would have Ramsey phones the Iraqi Prime Minister to offer airstrikes and support, but the Prime Minister rebuffs his offer, saying the Americans are looking to reoccupy Iraq. And then I don't know exactly how I was going to do this, but for now I'll just say Ramsey then calls the Iraqi president and tells him he has no confidence in the prime minister and asks him to relieve him of his position. Again, I don't know if this is exactly the way I'll do it because this is kind of becoming a large chapter. I don't know how large it would actually be, but there's several things that are going on. So Stephen Knight, and then, phone calls to the prime minister and so on. So I don't know. I may wind up doing this a bit different. I don't know. I just kind of had an idea. I picture my books like I'm watching the movie, like a movie version of my book. So I just kind of imagine Trevor just looking at the Mosul Dam. Oh, there was a whole plot point about draining the lake. I haven't even touched on that yet. So I guess, I just don't have room for that. I mean, Trevor may kind of mention it, but, I just don't have time for him to even begin doing that yet. So yeah, I may work that in somehow, and, I may even have him starting on that somehow. But yeah, that's just, I haven't had time to do that. And that's what's crazy about this, is because I had so little idea of what to do for this act. So, I mean, that was going to be one of the major things, was Trevor thinking about draining this lake. And you see, I only have 4 chapters left of space, and I haven't even touched on that yet. The battle has not even begun for the Mosul Dam, and I only have 4 chapters left before, the end of the act, really. So anyway, I was thinking Trevor is looking at this dam, just, maybe he's thinking about draining the lake then, or whatever, he's just looking at it thinking, okay, what do I do? No one's willing to help. And then I think, he can kind of look back and he could see that the Kurds are arriving, help has finally arrived. And basically, he hasn't been watching the news or whatever ever since he took Heidi on her flight. So, all the news has already been talking about this. So, the international community is already kind of coming together. So when he looks back, he sees that, forces are arriving. And I don't know if he would meet Firat here, the Iraqi or the Kurdish special forces guy. I don't know if he's going to be involved in this. because I kind of think he is probably still down in Baghdad. So I don't know, maybe it'll be like, one of Firat's, cousins, or maybe his like lieutenant or whatever, It doesn't have to be a member of the Malazada family. It could just be, his second in command or something. It could be the leader of the Peshmerga or whatever, because I haven't like said who runs them at all, who leads them. Firat just runs like the special forces, not the whole Peshmerga or whatever. So anyway, Trevor can see that the Kurds are arriving, and maybe like the Kurd could tell him like, your president Ramsey has announced that the United States is going to begin bombing ISIS and stuff in Iraq. Where's Mosul? There it is. Gosh, this video is just a me finding Mosul video. So anyway, the Trevor is overlooking the Mosul Dam, thinking about draining the lake, and looks back to see Kurdish forces arriving. A lieutenant, ? Tells him that Ramsey announced the Americans will begin bombing ISIS in Iraq. And then I guess I could say, and the president has removed the prime minister from office. The battle for the Mosul Dam commences. So, originally I was kind of going to have Trevor be the one leading that, but since the Kurds are here fighting and the Americans are helping with airstrikes, I think Trevor will just, at this point, still be more humanitarian aid. I don't think necessarily at this point that he's going to like switch and become a fighter. I don't know. I do kind of like the idea of him fighting, just because it seems like it'd be a very, kind of cinematic thing, like just fighting atop this dam or whatever, just like pushing their way down. Wow, I was going to say this looks like a face or something, like it looks like a helmet there, and like there's the eye, there's like the mouth guard or whatever, there's the forehead or whatever. I don't know, that I just saw that and kind of thought it looks like a Spartan helmet or something. Anyway, I forget where I was. So yeah, I don't know exactly how I'll do it, but there's Nibbler. Let's see, the battle for Mosul Dam commences. Can I go back to the Yazidi girl? I do not think so. I don't think there's anything I want to show with her. Battle for the Mosul Dam commences. Oh, I should probably check in on William Barrett. Let's see. He's overlooking. So, I should probably put it... No, I don't want to put the scene with the William Barrett between these. Actually, I think I do, because... Heidi has her report here. If Trevor is overlooking the Mosul Dam, her report has only presumably had like a day, in the public or whatever, So I think more time does need to pass. So I'll just actually knock this. Oh, I guess it doesn't matter. I don't know. The British Prime Minister meets with the Iranian president in New York, and they agree to release each other's ships, and the Iranian president privately assures the PM that their ship will not go to Syria. I'm losing my voice. I've been talking for so many hours. Since I don't want to have this spill into another chapter, I need to resolve this here. So I think a scene with the Iranian ship is released and goes to Turkey, where a man agrees to run the oil to Syria. So it's just like, oh, well, they're doing it anyway. But the ship is not technically going to Syria, but the oil is. And then Barrett sees, after a delay, the British ship moving away from Iran. Then I guess I just need to do some kind of a scene. I don't know, William Barrett final scene in the book. Maybe I'll do receives next orders, ? So, that'll set up kind of Atlantis Dislodged, where William Barrett, he kind of has to go around Israel for something. Maybe what he could do, kind of the pretext of it, is they may kind of want to get the Resilient away from Iran just because it poses so much risk having like their biggest warship in the region, because it's a major target for Iran. So maybe the ship that, took over the Iranian ship in the Mediterranean or wherever it is, maybe, they want the Resilient to take over for that ship. So maybe that ship has to go, back home or something. So, maybe William Barrett gets his orders that, he needs to go to the Eastern Mediterranean instead. And that would put him close to Israel for the next book. So yeah, that'll kind of set up the next book. So William Barrett receives his next orders. Then I have the scene with Trevor overlooking the Mosul Dam. The battle commences. I don't know if I should have a whole new chapter. I feel like I'm missing stuff, like just a bunch of content or whatever that I wanted to add, like scenes I wanted to add, because, the Americans are beginning to intervene, and, maybe something with the President Ramsey, or something with Stephen Knight, or anything, I suppose it doesn't matter at this point. This is just, I may on the spot decide like, oh, there's this other character, I could introduce them here, or, a character I mentioned earlier, maybe I could have something with them here. So ultimately it doesn't matter. The main thing here is to get the main plot points down. So, of course there may be little stuff I'm forgetting to mention here, but, I don't need to like rack my brain trying to think of every possible chapter or scene. I could still improvise later on. So that's not a problem really. Is there any other scene I want to add? Let's take a look at the map. Oh, I found Mosul pretty easy there. Anything with Turkey? I just don't think so. I have the idea of all the different international companies begin, intervening, but I don't know if I really need to show that or dedicate a chapter to it. Let's see. I have not introduced the ISIS general, in a long while, the one who is like in the Mosul Dam or whatever. So maybe I could like have a chapter with him showing like the arrival of Peshmerga or whatever, and they could begin getting attacked, and that'll kind of show the beginning of the battle from ISIS's perspective. So ISIS general at Mosul Dam comes under attack. The battle begins. Then I guess I'm probably thinking Trevor ? Mostly focuses on medical aid / efforts. And I'll just throw in another question mark because I'm just not sure about that. I'd kind of like him to be doing more humanitarian stuff at this point. I guess since it's like historical or whatever, I'll just say over the next few days they fight over the dam, and I guess just ultimately prevail. Does Trevor actually, like, fight that guy? I mean, maybe I could have a scene, like, where he's trying to get away and, maybe the Americans, like, take out his vehicle. Like, maybe he's going to his vehicle and, an airstrike takes his vehicle out. He's on foot at the time. So maybe, he kind of loses his escape route. So maybe he could, like, begin, like, a last-ditch effort to, they could have explosives set. So maybe he could be going to blow that up and blow up the dam, That's, like, his final thing. Like, okay, well, my last act will be to blow up this dam. And so maybe Trevor can, stumble upon him so they could have, like, a fight, preventing him from blowing up the dam. So they fight in the dam and ultimately prevail. The ISIS general's vehicle is destroyed by airstrike, preventing his escape. I guess I have to have this just for, like, dramatic purposes or whatever. He goes to detonate explosives set around the Mosul dam and is stopped by Trevor. I don't know exactly how I'll do it, but maybe, like, something where Peshmerga or whatever is trying to stop him, like they're shooting at him, and maybe he shoots back and, kills the people. So, maybe it's kind of like Trevor just picks up the gun and, shoots him, because it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to just wait for more help to arrive. So Trevor just picks up a gun then and shoots him then. So I think that's how it may happen. So it's stopped by Trevor. So the dam is retaken. I don't need to write that. I mean, that's pretty clear. Again, I keep thinking, like, do I need other scenes? Am I forgetting to have other scenes here? Now, where's Sinjar? It's more further. Oh, just look for that very distinct mountain. I need to have some kind of a chapter thrown in, but I'm just really drawing a blank on what. Gosh, I will probably think of other chapters to go in here, but again, this is not too important. They would be more filler chapters or chapters, touching on a character that I mentioned earlier that I've just forgotten about, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be exactly 20 chapters or whatever. So I would probably like to have another scene here, so I'll just write would like another scene here besides Trevor. I guess I'll just do another chapter, just kind of assuming there's something I could do here. Because again, I really feel like there's probably something I'm forgetting to do. So then I guess the next scene would just be Trevor and the... I don't want to just say the Kurds, because I think there's also, like, Yazidis with him. Trevor and allies move on Sinjar. Is that it? I could potentially do something like a scene where the one ISIS general, he could hear that, the Kurds are breaking through. In fact, I think I'll just write this down. Trevor and ally move on Sinjar. I don't think I need that. So what I'm thinking is ISIS general in Sinjar hears about the, how do I word this? Loss or defeat at the Mosul dam and the intervention of the Americans. Then, so what I'm thinking is he thinks that the Kurds are, way over here. So, I mean, I don't even know how long that may be, but presumably, at least, hour or two away, 75 or 100 miles or so. So he's thinking, they still need to fight through Zumar and Talafar and stuff. So Where am I? So he thinks they will be arriving in the next few days, but comes suddenly under attack from the west. And that is because Layla and the Kurds in Syria have came through the border to open up a corridor to help the Yazidis escape. So then, yeah, I guess it could shift back the next chapter where I guess instead of them just showing up, what I'd probably do is show Trevor at this point is still kind of more just medical aid and stuff. So, he's probably accompanying the Kurds on the way towards Sinjar, but each town, he may be helping with medical efforts or whatever. So he's kind of working his way towards Sinjar. Meanwhile, Sinjar, ISIS is already under attack from the west. I do not know exactly how I'll write all those scenes, but it's not important. Comes under attack from the west, and then I guess, do I have Layla Bigliari, I think is how to spell her name. Introduction scene. And then Kurds and Trevor battle against ISIS and retake Sinjar. Since I have this scene with the ISIS general, I want to have this scene with the boy. Maybe I could also set up later scene with the boy. So yeah, this chapter here, just have something there where they're going door to door or whatever. So I could actually begin the chapter with the boy, hiding out. And yeah, so he hears that, ISIS is moving through the house, and he could hear them talking, saying oh yeah, our brothers in Mosul at the dam were defeated. And so yeah, that's kind of how I could have that. What I was originally going to do was just have internal monologue or whatever, where the guy is just so-and-so, whatever, just presiding over the Sinjar massacre or whatever. He's just thinking about how he heard about whatever, the loss of the dam. So I think it makes much more sense from a narrative situation that this boy is hiding out in the closet or whatever, and he hears the ISIS fighters moving through the house talking about the Mosul dam. And, then, the battle commences from the west. They come under attack. And so the boy could be thinking, oh, help has arrived from the Mosul dam. They're already here. So, yeah, this scene may be largely set from the standpoint of this boy. And who this boy is, I do not know. It is not the brother, I think, of the one girl, because I kind of want that one girl, her whole family is killed. So that's why, she has nothing to stick around for. Her whole family is gone. So this one boy is, I think, just a separate, case. I mean, he's not related with her at all. And I don't think I want to have anything setting him up. So what I would probably do is he has a scene where he says the one ISIS fighter showed him mercy, and then maybe his mother could see him and run up to him or whatever. So, that boy has closure, so it's just well, what happens with the boy? So yeah, probably he just sees his mother and, they reunite, so they're okay. So that way I don't need to explain where does the boy go, So presumably just he and his mother or whatever are taken into Syria to escape, because again, there's still probably a lot of ISIS fighters to the east. So that's where they go. A lot of the Yazidis go into Syria. And then from there, they may go into Europe or whatever. Where's that funny mountain? Oh gosh, where is it? There's Erbil, so there it is. So yeah, I think I probably have it. Would another scene here besides Trevor Knight. Oh, I guess I don't need that because this is a scene besides Trevor Knight, right? Yeah, so don't think I need that. I already have that. I have another scene. So it's, yeah, I think that's good. Let's see. Set up a scene with a boy. I won't like retype all that because just knowing from this video, I'll know what that is. ISIS general in Sinjar hears about the defeat. Layla shows up. Trevor Knight arrives. They win the battle. Then the boy, whatever, all that scene, I talked about it earlier. Layla asks blah, blah, blah. The girl appears and shoots the ISIS fighter. Conclusions. And like I said, one of the main conclusions is Layla will, talk to that girl about joining the fight. She has nothing else, to live for, kind of. Her whole family is killed, so that girl will decide, I want to join you guys. I want to exterminate ISIS. And I know that sounds kind of, dark, whatever. I mean, she's just like, 17 or 18 years old. And, that'll probably be her language, is that, she wants to exterminate ISIS. And I mean, who can blame her? Her whole family was killed and she was assaulted and stuff. So, I mean, her brother was buried alive. Her father was taken off and shot. Her older sister was given a forced abortion. Her mother was made to walk down the street and then walk back. And, I don't know if I say, like, what happens if she gets killed. But, I mean, I think it's going to be clear in the book that her mother is dead, even if I don't show it. And she's going to be pretty much convinced her mother is dead. Gosh, I almost feel like I have blood in my throat from talking so long. I'm so sorry. Talking so long and no one's going to listen anyway. Maybe there could be a scene where the girl is like, calling for her sister or her mother or, her dad and, just no one, nothing. And so she kind of knows they're gone. Oh gosh, I almost started to cry. In fact, I am starting to cry just saying that because it's so real. Even though this is a fictional story, this is absolutely real stuff. I mean, real people went through this stuff. So even though this girl is fictional, I mean, someone went through her exact story, Someone's brother was buried alive and their father was taken off and shot. All this stuff is real. It's entirely based on real events. So even though she'll have a fictional name and all that, and her story is kind of just, pulled out of, I don't want to say my imagination necessarily, but I mean, she's not necessarily based on one real life person. It's just, the conglomeration of, all these events, real events in Sinjar. And so, I mean, someone like her definitely did exist. People went through this, and that's kind of part of why I'm writing this, is to show that, a lot of this stuff, I'm not making it up. It's based on real. And I'm just kind of fitting it all into my book, into my stories. So anyway, I think that is it. So for the conclusions, I don't think I'll have like a chapter with Heidi Barnum or whatever. I don't know exactly what her last scene will be, but I don't think I'll like have a chapter showing her because, readers probably won't really remember her. I don't know if I'll have a scene with the new prime minister because at this point, where's Mosul? There it is. Anyway, I think that's pretty much it for Act 2. Am I forgetting anything? I feel like I probably am. Again, because there's just so much stuff, both that I've already set up and things I want to set up, and all kinds of like little, tidbits of whatever, like, I could use this thing, like, Asajla, the Saudi prince. Like, I could have some kind of a scene somewhere about what are the Saudis doing? What are the Syrians doing? What are the Iranians doing? What are the Americans doing? Are the Israelis doing anything? There's so many things I could pick up on and add to the story, but I think the whole gist of it is pretty good. And I think, again, my main concern is that Trevor has an active role. So the ISIS general, they begin. So the act begins, one general is going to Tal Afar, the Kurds flee, then he moves on to Sinjar. The other general goes up to Zumar, the Kurds flee, and then he takes over the Mosul Dam. And Tom Marsh works to delegitimize the prime minister. That will come into play when they have the Iraqi general say that the prime minister told the army to retreat. All the scenes with the girl, so that will keep the Sinjar storyline in readers' minds, in the front of readers' minds. And I like that, I don't show any graphic depictions of assault or whatever. The most worst thing is seeing like the boy get buried alive, and I do think I'll actually show that scene. Trevor's in Erbil and he hears about this Yazidi prince who says, hey, stuff is going on at Sinjar, so he goes there to check that out. He hears about ISIS demolishing historical sites, so that's kind of setting up something for Act 3. The whole thing with the Iraqi general and the prime minister. Trevor tries to rally people to fight, but they don't really want to help. And then Heidi Barnum says, like, hey, well, work with me, I'll let the world know what's going on. And then the whole storyline with William Barrett, I'm glad I thought of that, because I forgot until like just this moment doing this video that I needed to have a William Barrett chapter. I had not thought at all about how to include him in this book. So I'm glad I thought of something. Trevor flies Heidi over the Sinjar Mountains. That was originally going to be like one of the main, that's like one of my earliest ideas for this act. I really didn't know much of anything else except that and the battle for the Mosul Dam. Then like the international community, because of Heidi's report, which Trevor is directly involved with, there's all that. This chapter is just, concluding William Barrett's storyline. Trevor overlooking the Mosul Dam, and the battle begins. And then here's like the main battle for the Mosul Dam. So it is actually still toward the end of the book. The end of the act. But still, even though it's toward the end of the act, it's not the climactic battle. Just like with Act 1, how, most of the Act 1 is about trying to get aid to Baghdad. The real goal for Trevor is to save the SAT team in Mosul. Just the same way, a lot of Act 2 is kind of about the Mosul Dam, but the real objective is the Sinjar situation. So the battle for the Mosul Dam is kind of ultimately just, a stepping stone to that. It's not really the main goal, even though it is an important thing. And then Trevor arrives in Sinjar and all of that. So for all of this scene in Sinjar, I don't think Trevor will take a very active role then either. Because again, at this point, I don't really see the need for Trevor to become a warrior so much. But yeah, maybe at that point when he is meeting with Layla, who, they have history together from Syrian Dander, maybe she kind of tells him like, there's work to do in Syria. We're still battling ISIS in Syria. Maybe Trevor will be a little bit divided, but it's not like he has to be in Iraq helping the Kurds. He wants to help the Kurds from Trevor's standpoint. The Kurds are one people. So it doesn't matter to him if he's helping them in Iraq or in Syria. As far as he's concerned, he's helping the Kurds. And he's fighting ISIS. So either one, he's, accomplishing his goal. He wants to help the Kurds and he wants to fight ISIS. So it's not like he would really think like, oh no, I have to go back and help the Iraqis. The Kurds in Syria, he has familiarity with them. So he may really easily think, hey, if you guys need help, I'm all aboard. And again, he doesn't quite have to at that point be committed to actually fighting. He could still want to do humanitarian stuff. So maybe he goes to Camp Kate over here to do humanitarian stuff. Maybe he thinks, hey, I'll check in on the humanitarian camp in Camp Kate, which would be kind of controversial for him because Camp Kate was kind of set up by Nema, where Trevor works, which I haven't talked about at all in these videos. But at the end of Arabian Dawn, Trevor actually kind of quits his job. So, if he goes to Camp Kate, it's not so much like he's doing so as a Nema employee. He could just be going there just purely kind of on his own. And, from there he could bump into, hear about the Syrian rebels, and then he could hear about the thing in Palmyra with the historical sites, and all that. And then, something, maybe the Kurds are moving on Al-Tabqa or whatever, Tabqa, and, then they're going on Raqqa. So anyway, I'll figure that out for Act 3. I do not want to start talking about that. But yeah, so I think the act ends with Trevor and Layla kind of saying, hey, well, why don't you come into Syria with us? We still have ISIS to fight. And so, yeah, I think Trevor can kind of decide okay, I'll help you guys out. I'll go into Syria. So I don't really need some big explanation for why he leaves Iraq. As far as he's concerned, he's helping the Kurds fight ISIS. He doesn't care whether he's doing that in Raqqa or in Mosul. As far as he's concerned, both need to be liberated. And here Layla is saying, hey, you can still help us out. And so Trevor's like, okay, sure. And yeah, so he goes back into Syria, I think. And that is Act 3. So anyway, I'm really happy about the way this turned out. So just to count here which act or which chapters Trevor is involved with. So he's not in the first one, he's not in the second, not in the third. He is in the fourth, which I think is okay. I don't need to have him introduced immediately. He's not in the next chapter, he is in the next. He's not in that chapter, he's not in that chapter, he is in that chapter. He's not in that chapter, is in that chapter, not in that chapter. I do not think he's in that chapter, but this all happens because of Trevor, because Trevor flies Heidi over the Sinjar Mountains. So Trevor is directly responsible for all the international community hearing about the Yazidis, So Trevor is involved. This happens directly as a result of Trevor's actions. The Prime Minister, blah, 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 that is not a Trevor chapter. This is a Trevor chapter. This is a Trevor chapter. Set up a scene with a boy. That is not really a Trevor chapter, but it's something Trevor's directly involved in. That is a Trevor chapter. Trevor will be in that chapter, and Trevor will be in that chapter. So he's in almost every chapter or every other chapter, or even the chapters he's not involved in. They're either relating directly with him or are caused by him. The scenes are a result of his actions. So really everything in the act does pertain to Trevor, except the William Barrett scenes. Those are kind of just, thrown in. They don't have anything to do with Trevor. In fact, this is book 6. Trevor has not yet had a single scene with William Barrett. There is a scene in Ottoman Destiny where Trevor actually rides the same ship as William Barrett. He hitches a ride from Cyprus to Athens on the same ship. But it's very clear in the book that I have a line where it says Trevor has not met the captain yet. So Trevor has not yet ever met face-to-face William Barrett, but William Barrett has actually seen Trevor in Cyprus. He sees him walking by. So William Barrett has seen Trevor. Trevor has not presumably seen William Barrett. So by book 7, Atlantis Dislodged, they have not yet even met. which I kind of like that, William Barrett has been in the series all along and has not had a single scene with Trevor yet. But in Atlantis Dislodged, they might have their first scene together. So I kind of like that, just like the two main characters of the series kind of have never even met yet. Anyway, I think that is it. So yeah, I really like the way this worked out. When I began this video, I had really very little clue about how this all happens. So I am very happy with how that all worked out. So next is Act 3. I think Act 3 should be pretty easy to do because it's just kind of the one storyline with the Syrian rebels, the second storyline with the historical sites, and then the third storyline with the actual fighting against ISIS around Raqqa. So I think that'll be pretty easy to do. And then Act 4 will be tricky because that one, again, I don't really know too much how to do that. But anyway, that is it for Act 2. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So I think that is it for this video. So if anyone has watched this entire video, oh my God, you are a hero. But anyway, I enjoyed making it. I enjoyed doing this, and it's really helpful for me because, like I said, when I started this video, I had no idea how to do Act 2, but just by talking about it, the ideas just come to me. So thank you guys so much for listening or watching if you have. It has helped me greatly. And maybe if you've watched this, maybe you found some part of the video entertaining, or maybe you watched this video to help put you to sleep. Either way, thank you guys. I hope the video has been useful to you. Hope to see you in another video. Bye.
2, 3, 4.